actually start streaming. Hey guys, did we do it? Are we here? Did we do it? We did it. Me and the pug here laying it out for you today. For you today. Went down to City Hall to record and report on socialist action, launching a municipal campaign, trying to run people in City Hall. That was great to see. You know, that's very hopeful to see. Honestly, I feel like the there's a lot of hopelessness going on, right? There's a lot of hopelessness going on, and I myself am a bit guilty of engaging in the hopelessness, in feeling as though nothing's working, nothing's happening. Oh my God, why bother, right? But going out to an event like that, seeing people who are passionate, who believe that change can occur, who believe that things can happen, who believe that we can actually make a difference and we can actually push forward. And I think who are making the correct decision in no longer believing that the classic parties, the NDP and the Liberals and all this, are at all interested in helping us. I think that they are right in coming to an understanding that the time of the NDP is over, that we can no longer pretend. I know for myself, anytime I'm getting into conversation with NDP types, it's just unbelievable. Like, anytime I get into conversation with NDP types, these NDP types are acting as though they're winning these elections. Like, that's their attitude. They're acting as though they haven't just experienced humiliating losses in Ontario and federally. They're acting as though their ascension to power is an inevitability or something, right? Hey Adam, how you doing? Healthy Planet Canada First. That's nice. Healthy Planet Canada First. Isn't that nice? And now a Disney metal poster ad for Endgame? I feel like I'm out of the loop. I don't try to. I used to be like such a Disney fan. Like back in like the 90s when it was all like, I can show you the world. That era of Disney from like The Little Mermaid until like Mulan, I think. Like, even though I think there were some like hiccups and some ups and downs, right? Sure. But more or less they were still focused on like, we should make good art. Like, I would see behind the scenes stuff and like Disney was always like at its core still saying out loud, like, yes, we need to make money, obviously, but we are here to make good art. They were still always saying that. I'll never forget when I saw The Sweatbox, which is a documentary about the making of Emperor's New Groove. Hey, look at these. How you doing, bud? And they were ruthless. Like they were kind, nice gentlemen. They weren't screaming at anyone. They weren't mean, but they were ruthless, right? If something wasn't working, they would tell you, and they would expect you to change it. Like, they had conversations like Sting, for God's sakes, where like they were making it very clear that like, nope, we're not getting what we want. We want this changed, right? And they were having like really difficult conversations with a high level musician like Sting, and they were just, you know, plant their feet and be like, this is what we expect. And when the documentarian would speak to them, they would talk very plainly like, we are making art. Like, people expect this from us. They expect it to be good, you know? And that's all gone from Disney. They're not interested in making art anymore. That's done, right? They are in it just for the money. That's the only thing that they are moving forward with. And all of the decisions that are coming out of Disney are just like, how can we get butts in seats and get people to watch our schlocky nonsense? And so it's not art anymore. Right? And I feel like Martin Scorsese really hit it on the head when he said that modern movies aren't really cinema anymore. They're more like roller coaster rides. And I hadn't actually thought about it that way, but the second he said it, I was like, yeah, that's right. That's why I'm so disillusioned with modern movies and modern storytelling, because they're not actually telling stories. They're not actually engaging in the process of cinema, right? That it's just like a roller coaster ride, right? Oh, and there's Iron Man, and oh my God, like, and Harry Potter shoots the wand, right? Like there's nobody actually has an arc. Nobody learns anything. They're not trying to make a point about anything in the world. They're literally just like, it's like the cinematic equivalent of dangling keys in front of you, like just ding 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 ding, and you're supposed to be like ha 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 oh, ha 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 ha, and many people are, although that's evolving and shifting and changing and all of that kind of stuff. So speaking of evolving and shifting and changing, so I feel like I've got like three base components in this. I've got three collections of articles. Let's start with inflation. The big story today, of course, being that the Bank of Canada has hiked the rate to 2.5%. People were reporting that the expectation was that they were going to raise it by 0.75%. That was what people were reporting on in terms of their expectation. Well, they raised it by 1%, so even further along than people were expecting. I think the CBC's article is pretty much kind of on a point for point, like, what is this going to mean? Although one of the things that I find very interesting about this whole inflation conversation is that it's happening while no one is talking about the reality that corporate profits are through the roof. No one is actually talking about the transfer of wealth from the lower and middle class into the upper class, and even from the upper class into the oligarchy, right? No one is actually seriously addressing the fact that, like, oh, the economy is losing its mind and everything's going crazy because all the money is in a pile over there underneath these, like, five guys, right? Hey, Watson, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. Good to see you. And because no one is talking about the elephant in the room, the NDP included, with the exception of, like, a backbencher MP every once in a while, right? Because there's no actual conversation about it, everyone's just kind of bobbing their head along and going like, oh, yeah, did you hear? Yeah, the Bank of Canada, they raised the rate, and that's the only thing that could ever be done about this thing, right? And the reality, of course, being, like, the NDP, like, they do talk about tax the rich. That's a Jagmeet Singh sort of statement. He's in with, like, AOC for that. But it's pretty obvious to me that the strategy of the oligarchy and of the wealthy class is that should the populace finally go, wait a minute, we could just tax the wealthy, and let's all go for the NDP. Forget these liberals and these conservatives. I'm sick of this. Let's go NDP. That Jagmeet Singh will get in, raise taxes on the wealthy by 2% or whatever, right? Like, and everybody will keep going to work, and we'll all just keep doing what we're doing right now, right? That the NDP exists as controlled dissent exclusively. They don't exist to improve the quality of our life in any kind of meaningful way. I know, buddy. I know. Who am I talking to? Who am I talking to even right now, bud? Who am I talking to right now, dude? I'm just by myself in a room talking to myself. Well, talking to you, obviously. Talking to you, obviously, my little guy. Yeah, oh yeah, you want to hear? Nope. Wow. Boom, boom. Oh, I know. I love you too. Oh, I love you too. I love you too, and so does everybody else out there. Don't you love Milo too? I know. Things are crazy right now, right? Sometimes just looking at a dude holding a pug, it's exactly what the soul needs. If you're out there in the world thinking to yourself, boy, howdy, things have gone crazy, well, just remember, there are people holding pugs in the world. And you know, you could be a person holding a pug too. They're stupid little critters. And I love them. I love them, don't I love them? You're such a cutie pie, buddy. Okay, down you go. Oh, there you go, bud. What a good little boy. What a good little boy. Thanks for putting up with that, bud. I know you hate that. No, get out of here, bud. Get out of here. I know what you're after. Heard about this Will Lehman thing in the U.S. and is running for president of the UAW through his formation of rank-and-file committees? That's... Sure. Isn't that like Lehman of the Lehman Brothers? Right? Like during the 2008 financial collapse, the Lehman Brothers were like, is this who we're talking about? Yeah, they might as well, right? Like, come on, man. Like, I don't know why everybody thinks, like, a big reason why labor is in the situation that it is because the unions have capitulated, right? The unions have capitulated. Hey, Clara, how you doing? John, I posted an article in the Discord. I submit to the will of Milo. Yes. Bow to the will of the adorable pug. A short book review of Thomas Sowell book, Basic Economics. Think you should read it. Remind me later, okay, Eric? If you're still around. I've got quite a bit here. And, of course, I get tied up in the chat. But you know what? At the same time, your stuff's always good, bud. I always really like your stuff. Yeah. Basic Economics, A Citizen's Guide to the Economy, by Thomas Sowell, who, in my view, is just like a dunce, right? Like, if like, taking economic advice from a guy like Thomas Sowell is a lot like taking tennis advice from someone who holds the racket upside down. That's how I view it. Sowell's economics in a social vacuum is as meaningful as color in the absence of light. Get wrecked. From conservative think tanker Sowell, The Quest for Cosmic Justice, etc., ideological balderdash parading as disinterested introduction to economics. Utter ignorance and gross fallacies dominate the economic knowledge of the man on the street, thunders Sowell. So here he is to right this wrong with clear-eyed introduction to the dismal science, free of bell curve and bar graph, and most of all with nothing to say about the validity of social, moral, or political goals such as affordable housing, a living wage, or social justice. Readers can almost feel the spray of his invective, but Sowell claims that these elements play no role in economics, which is the study of the use of scarce resources, which have alternative uses. The free flow of money and goods in a competitive market is Sowell's Eden, as he trots out one example after another of how fettering the market will bring ill results, how the homeless of New York would have roofs if there had never been rent control, how distinguishing discrimination from differences in qualifications and performance is not easy in practice, though the distinction is fundamental in principle, as if racism were no more institutionalized than his market is value-free. Monopolies are very hard to maintain without laws to protect the monopoly forms from competition, is typical Sowell, as if 1, monopolies were foundlings in need of protection, and 2, they didn't get that very protection already. When Sowell reduces economics to the twin concepts of scarcity and the intelligent allocation of resources, he really does seem to think his readers are so ill-informed and misinformed as to forget that without society there would be no economics, and that society does sometimes think about the social contract, rights, and protection of the weak. Sowell's economics in a social vacuum is as meaningful as color in the absence of light. Yeah, Thomas Sowell's a fraud. Like, look, if you pay people enough, they'll say anything. That's just the end of it, right? Like, if you just pay people enough, they'll say anything. Thomas Sowell is one such person. Like, it's like, you don't need to get, like, it's like Peterson. Like, once you realize that he's a fraud, then all you can do is ridicule him. That's all. Like, No, Lehman is a worker in Virginia and is calling out the UAW bureaucracy. Yeah, Thomas Sowell is the Jordan Peterson of economics. Yeah, you made the connection for me, Watson. I don't know enough about this story, Watson. So if you have an article for me, dude, if you can show me where to do. Clara, I gotta talk on this. Hi, I just have to tell you this. I met up with a person today, and she seriously said, the good thing about capitalism is that anyone can build themselves up and be successful in it. Yep. Like, all you gotta do is believe in that magic is real, right? You too can be a billionaire, right? You just need to buckle down. Try as hard as you can, right? WS. New York City releases nuclear war alert. Yeah, isn't that good? We're heading towards the nuclear war situation. We'll touch on that when we get into the Ukraine section of all of this. President Rajapaksa flees Sri Lanka after popular uprising. Yeah, this popular uprising is fun, eh? I love this Sri Lanka thing, dude. Like, I hope things happen for them. I talked to a guy today at the rally. One of the fellows that's running for city council with Socialist Action, and he's from Sri Lanka originally, and he was just like, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because like, just because they've like had the popular uprising and they've ousted these losers doesn't mean that what's next, right? That's always the question. Like, what's next, right? Hey, Anemone, how you doing? How you doing? Yeah, Clara, I gotta tell you, I just think sometimes people, they want to be with the in crowd. It's as simple as that. They just want to be with the in crowd. And if they think the in crowd is saying, like, this is what's good, then that's what they're going to say, right? And somebody like this has never done any, like, serious investigation, right? They've never done any, like, actual digging, right? They're just, like, they're towing the party line, right? Very, very seriously. Milo, man. What? I can't help you there, bub. Come on. January 6th hearing derails Trump's calls for fascist violence to overthrow election. Conceals role of military and police in coup violence. I'm not finding this article, bud. I'm not finding this article. Pay me to say D's nuts. Good to see you, Cotton. Good to see you, Nut Milk. Sometimes I think you just come in here, Nut Milk, so that I'll say Nut Milk. Nut Milk. Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. Lots of good articles always at the WSWS, man. Lots of always good stuff. Not finding this particular article. Not finding this. Perhaps type, name in the search. Watson, I'm working hard for it, buddy. I'm working hard for it. Oh, right here. Right here. Right here. Will Lehman, Max Trucks worker, approved as eligible candidate for UAW International President. Will Lehman, a Max Truck worker in Pennsylvania, has been approved. I gotta... Look. Don't do this to me. Okay? I hate it. I hate it when people do this. Will Lehman, Max Trucks worker, approved as eligible candidate for UAW International President. Oh, well, that looks like an interesting article. Let's give that a read. Shall we continue? Will Lehman, a Max Trucks worker in Pennsylvania, has been approved as an eligible candidate to run as national president of the United Auto Workers. Oh, you don't say. They just restate the headline. Lehman received the news that he was a bona fide candidate for international office Wednesday afternoon from the court-appointed monitor overseeing the elections. This status of bona fide candidate means that Lehman has met all the requirements. So who is this guy? Why do I care about this guy? Responding to the news, he told them it's an important step to place power in the hands of rank-and-file workers. This is the thing. This is why it's exciting, because I don't know who this guy is, right? He's just a worker, right? He's a nobody. He's just a nobody. And at this point, we should be voting for the nobodies, right? Like, just straight up. Like, just don't vote for anybody who's got, the liberal, NDP, conservative, Green Party stamp. Just vote for literally anybody else. I really am at this point now where we can't do worse. We actually can't. And it's going to get obvious that that's the case, right? Like, I don't know why we actually think that the solid money is just stay the course as we careen off this cliff, right? Oh yeah, okay. Like, there's no other option at all, no other idea. Anyway, Lehman called for the formation of rank and file committees at all UAW factories and workplaces and endorsed the International Workers Alliance of rank and file committees. The recent inflation figures, which show more than 9% increase in consumer prices last month, he said Wednesday, underscore the catastrophic conditions workers face as a result of concessions contracts imposed by the UAW. Workers need a new strategy to fight for what we need, not for what the corporations and UAW bureaucrats say is affordable. Yep. If somebody like this can actually ascend, which skeptical. I'm always skeptical that the electoral system will actually permit somebody like this to ascend and actually seize power. But I'd rather see it than not, right? Let them steal the election. Like, let's watch them do it, right? My candidacy is the project of the upsurge of auto and other workers, Lehman said. It is critical that it reach the broadest possible audience. And I mean, we're seeing more and more, like the inflation rate in Europe, right? And you can go, like, take a look at what's happening in Turkey, for God's sakes. 78% inflation in Turkey. Like, imagine in 1 month, prices basically double. Like, really think about how that would mess everything up for you. Right? Like the price of food, the price of fuel, the price of everything you buy. 78%? Are you kidding me? Right? But even if you want to look at places where it's not so ridiculous, like you're looking at like your Latvias and Estonias, right? That's going up. Belarus, Russia is experiencing 17%. You got Poland at 15%. Now we're playing the fun game of how many places can John name, right? You got Germany, 7%, France at 5%, 6% rather, the UK at 9%, 10% for Spain, right? Like, so everybody's just getting completely pilloried. Yeah, the inflation rate in Turkey is outrageous, right? Moldova is experiencing a lot here. Hungary, yeah, I think I did it. Is that right? Hungary is there. Okay, now we're pulling up the Google Maps. I gotta know. Did I get it? Oh, Romania. I knew it. The second I said Hungary, I was like, that's wrong. I knew it was Romania. I said Hungary, and I was like, that's wrong. It's Romania. Romania at 14%. Hungary at 11%. Right? Like the, yeah, thanks, Watson. So, this, I mean, and then up in the Netherlands, right? Like your Sweden's, Finland's, and all this. Like they're even there with their social democracies, right? Like even they're getting pilloried. So everybody's getting completely fucked and completely pilloried, right? Iceland at 8.8%. And I am more or less of the opinion that this inflation is not going to improve, right? Like there's a lot of reasons for why the inflation should be happening right now. And I think it comes down to 3 major things that are happening. And of course, these things are not actually ever talked about, right? Thing number 1, like these countries over COVID literally printed a ton of money, right? Just literally printed it. That was the strategy. Let's print a bunch of money, right? And that's a fine thing to do. It's fine to print a bunch of money as long as you then tax that money away. And the reason why you need to tax that money away is because the simple act of printing it will inflate your economy, right? It's very, very basic. Like that. But that's just one thing. Number 2 is just straight up price gouging, right? Like we don't talk about it. It doesn't get talked about. Just straight up. As much as, in some reports, it's as high as 40% of the level of inflation that we're seeing is just corporations being like, we could just jack our prices. What are they going to do? Go somewhere else? Right? Everybody got bankrupted over COVID. All the small businesses got out. The big businesses got a bunch of subsidies. right? To stay open. People can't go anywhere else because there is nobody else. So we might as well jack the prices as if we're a monopoly of some kind. Right? Like, it's what happens. And then number 3, I had a third thing. Yeah. Look at me. I'm like that Republican nominee way back in the day who was like, the third thing, I don't remember. Oh well, what are you gonna do? Right? But like jacking prices, oh yeah, right. Oil, right? Oil touches literally everything, right? Like our entire system, our entire economic system is built in to oil. And we have, in essence, hit peak oil already. And everybody is anticipating an oil decline, right? It has to, just by the course of like how it works. And so you've got a bunch of, sociopaths basically going, well, basic supply and demand says that I'm completely justified in jacking the price of oil because the supply is going down. And so if the supply goes down, then blah, 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 blah. But it touches literally everything. So you've got corporations just jacking prices generally. Then you've got the peak oil decline, right? And that's only going to get worse. And then you've got money printing, right? And nobody ever talks about these things. Like, what are the excuses that we're always given? It's the Ukraine. It's the war in Ukraine. That's what it is. It's like remember that year where everything got blamed on El Nino, right? Man, traffic's really bad today. Must be El Nino, right? Like everything was El Nino. It's like that Chris Farley sketch. I am El Nino. El Nino is Spanish for the Nino. I can't see how we survive the fall now while things are already bad and there's another lockdown and 5 million people are excluded from society again. Yeah, you know what, man? CR Strifey, humanity will find a way. Like, we're not going to go extinct. Like, I mean, unless literally the whole thing, unless the atmosphere just like goes, right? If the atmosphere goes and there's like there's nothing protecting us from the UV radiation from the sun, and we just get scoured, right? Then we're toast, obviously. Like, and that could happen. Like, it could straight up happen. Like, we're dicking around with forces that we aren't actually in control of, right? Milo, no more, buddy. Okay? No more. You're just whining for nothing. You're just whining for nothing. You're not getting any treats. You're not getting any food. You're not getting anything. You've already eaten. You don't have a toy. Where's your toy, dude? Where's your toy? Where's your toy? This guy, right? This guy. Like, he's like an NDPer, right? Hey, everybody, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. Yeah, what's up, NDPer? Pay attention to me. Okay, what's up? Yeah. Like, what do you need, buddy? What do you need? He's just staring at me, whining. Yeah, you mean like Strasserites? I don't know enough about Strasserites to actually talk about it. When they blame a certain ethnic group for everything. I mean, sounds like Nazis to me. El Nino caused my gout. Yeah, of course. Of course, El Nino causes everything, right? Today in America, just 3 Wall Street firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, manage $22 trillion in assets. These 3 firms are major shareholders in more than 96% of S&P companies. Obscene. Like, this is why I don't care to talk about like the WEF or Bilderberg or anything. Like, this is the power center of America and of the world, frankly. Like, look at this. This is the beating heart of it, right? 3 firms are major shareholders in more than 96% of S&P 500 companies. Like, these are the people running the show, right? Like, your Bilderberg groups and your WEF and all that kind of stuff. Like, those kinds of organizations are always going to exist, right? They're always going to exist. You're never going to get away from it, right? It's never going to happen. But this doesn't need to exist. This is grotesque. Like, this is the true grotesquerie. Okay, guys, 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, guys. All right, sorry about that. Literally, I got the little dog looking at me, just being like, Yeah, I agree. Hedge funds are part of the WEF, but people invert it often. Like they look at it and go, the WEF is the power center of the world, and that's where everybody is doing blah blah blah. But that's not the case. It's the opposite is true. These are the people with the power. That if the WEF for whatever reason stopped acting in a way that these guys wanted them to, then these guys would walk away from the table and the WEF would become an irrelevant institution, right? This is the power, right? Where these people go, the rest of the world follows. If the WEF made a declaration and these people were like, no, we're not doing that, then it would be meaningless, right? Whereas if these people make a declaration, right, and the WEF said, well, no, it would be meaningless for the WEF. Like, what these guys say is what happens, right? And there's a reason why we're constantly being fed this, like, WEF, Bilderberg, look at these, look at this, oh my God, look, right? It's just classic distraction. Don't look at the thing that matters the most, right? Which is obviously that these three groups own 96% of 500 S&P companies. Like, come on. Like, come on, man. Like, they've got the wealth, they've got the money, they've got the power. That's where it is, right? People can say what they like, but if they don't have the money, it doesn't matter. Anyway. Just briefly touching down, Amazon workers at the DTG5 warehouse in Atlanta walked off the job to demand better pay. So the unionization of Amazon continues, right? God bless you guys. Keep up the good fight. Workers in Panama are holding a 24-hour strike, paralyzing workplaces and industry to demand a reduction in price freeze on fuel prices, as well as food and medicine. So, God bless you guys. Hope you're doing well out in the world. Okay, I do want to read this one because it's a CBC article, so your good old-fashioned state propaganda, right? The Bank of Canada has raised its benchmark interest rate by the largest amount in more than 20 years, sharply increasing the cost of borrowing in an attempt to rein in runaway inflation. Canada's central bank raised its benchmark interest rates Wednesday by a full percentage point to 2.5%. That's the biggest one-time increase in the bank's rate since 1996. The bank's rate impacts the rate that Canadians get from their lenders on things like mortgages and lines of credit. All things being equal, a central bank cuts the lending rate when it wants to stimulate the economy by encouraging people to borrow and invest. It raises rates when it wants to cool down an overheated economy. After slashing its... Overheated is such an odd word to use. I find that overheated is just the weirdest word to use. And this whole, like, cooling down an overheated economy, right? Like, it's like... Because doesn't it imply that it's just like, oh, we're just doing too much, right? We just need to slow down and take a breather, right? When in reality, it's like, no, we're just everything's gone off the rails. We've lost control of it, right? It's not that it's not that it's overheated. Anyway, after slashing its rate to record lows at the start of the pandemic, the bank has now raised it 4 times since March, right? You're seeing a big inflation rate, bank's rate going on up. Economists had been expecting the bank to raise its rate by 0.75 of a percentage point, but the full percentage point increase was ahead of even those high expectations. And even after this record-setting increase, more hikes are expected because of how serious the specter of stubbornly high inflation is. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem said the bank made the decision to front-load its rate hike campaign because Canadians are getting more worried that high inflation is here to stay. We cannot let that happen. Like, I actually watched this video of Tiff Macklem. First of all, guys, I gotta be straight with you. Like, the guy's name is Tiff Macklem, right? Tiff Macklem. Like, what a great name to have a guy have in this moment in time, right? Like, Tiff Macklem is exactly the type of guy who's gonna have a wife by the name of, like, Muffy, right? Who's gonna say things like, well, if the poor don't want to be poor, they should just choose not to be poor, right? Like that kind of dumb bullshit. Yeah, gotta be a banker, right? Gotta be some kind of thing, right? Exactly. Like, when I hear the name Tiff Macklem, I just think out of touch rich white guy, right? Yeah, it's probably Tiffany. Yeah, Tiffany Macklem. That's what I'm gonna call him from now on. Yeah, getting more worried that high inflation here is that we are increasing our policy interest rates quickly to prevent high inflation from becoming entrenched. If it does, it will be more painful for the economy and for Canadians to get inflation back down. Of course, reminding everybody, right? What's the economy? What is the economy? It's the three institutions that own everything, right? That's what the economy is. So when they say it will be more painful for the economy, they mean it'll be more painful for the billionaire class, right? Like, that's what this means. That's what this is. And of course, and for Canadians, obviously, right? Because raising the interest rate won't be painful for Canadians, right? He said, noting that the bank doesn't expect the official inflation rate to come down to 3% until next year and won't get back to its 2% target until 2024. This is, again, like the thing that these politicians always do, right? Which is they're like, we're making changes now, but just bear down, live with it for a couple more years. And then when the couple more years pass and everything's still as it is, right? And everything's still shitty, we're all just supposed to be like, oh, you're so distracting. Did you know that? Can you guys see him in the frame? I kind of want you to see him in the frame. Yeah, he's like right there. That's perfect, actually. You're such a good boy. Yes, you are. You're like a little cartoon character. Adding a little character to this. He's extra right now. You're so extra right now, buddy. It's because I wasn't home. I left home, and so I wasn't interacting with him. And so now he's got all of this, like, interact with me energy. Large hike warranted, economist says. Who's the economist? Economist Stephen Gordon with the University of Laval says it's clear the bank has miscalculated the speed with which inflation was going to heat up, and now are trying to course correct on the fly. Oh, good. So we had no plan, right? They're playing a bit of catch up here, right? Yep, we didn't have a plan. We've lost control of it. We've got to do these drastic measures because we don't know what we're doing. Because my name is fucking Tiff Macklem, right? And I'm literally our prime minister is a drama teacher. Like, these guys don't know what they're doing. And they've got to create some kind of narrative to justify why they're not just taxing the wealth away from the billionaire class. Right? That's where the money is. Like, that's where it's gone. It's extremely obvious that that's the case. You've got to be like a dumb, gullible rube to think anything else. This is what people are talking about when they say the rich need to, quote unquote, pay their fair share, right? We created a bunch of money, infused it into the economy to get through this period of time, and instead of turning around and being like, well, we should get that money back out of the economy, balance the inflation rate again, right? Instead of doing that, well, we gotta, you know what we should do? We gotta raise the interest rate because the middle class and upper class people who have mortgages and loans, they should pay for this. That's what we should do. We should bleed the middle class and them out for the next couple of years and let the rich just keep the money, right? And it's also real beneficial for the rich because when a bunch of people declare bankruptcy, it means that the rich will be able to use the extra money that we gave them to buy those assets. So it's just like a continuation of the extraction, right? All of this is just a continuation of the system of extraction. That the goal is to extract real assets out of the society into the hands of the oligarch class. That's the whole goal, is to make sure that you own nothing and are happy about it. While the size of the hike was outside the norm, he says it was warranted given the unprecedented challenges facing the economy today. We're in a situation where we have supply chain disruptions, right? They're just, when they say, oh, we're having supply chain disruptions, what they are admitting is that we are clueless and don't know how to run anything. They're admitting it to you, because it's better for them to admit that they're incompetent and stupid, that they don't have a second plan. They don't have like this, yeah, if the supply chain gets disrupted, we can't have another chain or some kind of redundancy or some kind of secondary plan. No, right? They're just admitting they're stupid, because it's better for them to admit that they're stupid than to tell the truth, which is that they want rich people to get richer. Like that's it. That's what's happening, and it's happening right in front of you, right? We have really high oil prices. Yeah, well, good thing we privatized those oil systems, right? Pent-up demand coming out of the pandemic, he said. We're in new territory here, so there's very little to guide us in the way of history. What are you talking about? We're in new territory here? There's very little to guide us in the way of history? Yeah, this is exactly what happened in Germany. Like, pretty much on a one-for-one basis, right? This is precisely what occurred in Germany, right? That's the path we're on here. Right? We all know it, right? There's very little to guide us in the way of it. What are you talking about? When Germany got out of World War I, right? They had printed a whole bunch of money for themselves to get through the period of time. They didn't want to tax their wealthy. They didn't want to tax the elite, right? So inflation ran rampant. There are stories that come out of Germany where people literally would like take their wheelbarrows of money and go get their shit, because they knew that as the day went on, inflation would just chew it all away. And what does this do? Just spurs the fascists along, right? Because what do the wealthy do? They take the wealth that we handed them by printing the money and sending it into the economy, and they give it to literal Nazis. Like, that's what's going to happen here. We should expect it. It's pretty much a one-for-one. So far, so good, right? Housing market will feel the pinch. Oh, the impact of higher rates will be felt most directly on the housing market, as variable rate mortgages are closely tied to the central bank's rate. Canada's housing market was red hot for most of the pandemic, as record low rates fueled demands and pushed prices up to their highest levels ever. But that direction turned in the first part of this year as the central bank signaled the higher rates were coming, took the wind out of the sails of unsustainable demand. Average prices have fallen since March across the country, the Real Estate Association said. Wednesday's rate hike will do nothing to reverse that trend. Prospective home buyers must have their finances stress tested to ensure they can withstand higher blah 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 blah. Like, I mean, it's such bullshit, because the amount that it's actually declined, like if we let's click on the link that they've provided. Right? If we click on the link, do they have a chart? Right? A change in average home price, right? So overall in Canada, okay, so it went down 10%. So literally, are they going to show us an actual chart? No. So they don't actually provide like the actual chart. And incidentally, average selling price is down 13%. Yeah, but the housing price is fucking doubled. So, it went down 13%, right? This is the ratchet effect in right in front of your face, right? Ratchet prices up by like 50 to 100%, right? And then make hay when they drop 10%, right? And then up and down, and up and down, and up and down. And the line goes that way. Like really, really go crazy when the prices go down, right? 10%, and then barely report when they double, triple, it doesn't matter. Fucking losers. Fucking losers. On a $400,000 mortgage, amortized for the normal time frame of 25 years, a borrower who signs for a loan of 3% rate will pay $1,800 a month. But if their rate jumps by a full percentage point, the way the bank's rate just did, that monthly payment will go up to $2,100 a month. That's an extra $211 a month out of their budget. If that rate goes up to 5%, it can jump up to 2,326, which would be more than 22% higher than what they were originally paying. Yeah, everybody's getting fucked. Like, it's just everybody's getting fucked. Good to see you, Matthias. Good to see you, Vince. I did see the new Batman movie. Hold on, let me... Yeah, Tiffany Muffy. Great reset in action, yeah. High inflation instead of taxing 1%. Yeah, tax the 99%. That's what this is. Right? That is what this is. Yeah, capitalists should take a large hike for sure. Good to see you, Major. A serious case can be made that these interest rates hike are first and foremost to smash any wage demands that hit the profitability of the ruling class profit centers. Yeah, I'd say that plays a part of it for sure. Richard Tiffany Macklem, Dick Tiff Macklem, yeah. More like you will own nothing, and we don't care if you're happy about it. Yeah, that's a fair thing to say, Matthias. Yeah, supply chain disruption means our monopolies weren't set up for this type of disruption. Well, they set it up. Like, they literally... Take a look at what happened with the Rogers outage that happened recently, right? They take all of their eggs, they put them in one basket, because it's cheaper for them to operate this way. And if something goes wrong, the whole thing comes down, and they just go, oh, well, because they don't actually care. Right? It doesn't matter to them. Like, it doesn't matter to the rich and the powerful if the 911 services go down with the banking services. Isn't that nice to know? Isn't it nice to know that at the same time that your connection to your money, the entire banking system, it can go down at the same time that your ability to call 911 in order to get critical help can go down? Isn't that nice? Right? Aren't we constantly saying that, like, I'm concerned about Chinese cybersecurity threats. I'm concerned that the Chinese can come in and cause problems in cybersecurity. Well, then why are we not creating any redundancies whatsoever? Like, why can, like, a fucking teenager take the system down by, like, coughing on a server? Like, it's so fucking ridiculous. Not fascists, patriots. Yeah, exactly. Have I seen the new Batman movie? Okay. I have. I liked it because it finally, for probably the first time in any live action Batman movie, Bruce Wayne was a character. I think that's really what I can say about it. That Bruce Wayne, like, I really got the sense that he was a lost little boy. I think they actually captured it. That he doesn't know who anybody is. He's literally figuring out who are the rich people in the society. Like, he doesn't know who anybody is, right? He's literally a disconnected, confused, angry, sad young man who doesn't know what to do, and has chosen, out of his confusion and inability to understand what's going on in his own life, he's chosen to interact with the world around him in this way. And because of his wealth and power and status and position, everyone around him enables it. Nobody at any point tries to dig any deeper than his suit. And at the end, you actually end up with a character who actually does have an arc, even if that arc is small, right? Like, he literally goes from being, like, on the path of vengeance, which they're fairly explicit in showing how that's a poison pill. I think they actually did a really good job of that. That he starts the narrative by saying, I am vengeance, and then realizes that that is being reflected in the villains that he is fighting, right? Because they say the same thing. And so there's connective tissue there. And I feel like Robert Pattinson is probably the best actor to play the role. Like, I think that, no, I shouldn't say the best actor, obviously, but I think that he was given the most material and did the best job of milking that material, or milking that material, but giving life to that material. Like, at the end of the day, Bruce Wayne was a real character. who had real growth. I still can't recommend the movie because I know exactly what they're going to do, which is start jerking off about sequels, right? And I am fine if they want to do a trilogy of this, because good first outing, but like these sort of franchises have a tendency to betray people, right? Like that's like, how often have we been set up and just completely betrayed? Like, it happens all the time these days, and there's like an expectation of it now, where studios actually think that they can just jerk whatever out, and people will just come see their schlocky nonsense and their schlocky bullshit. And so while there was actual character growth, and while they were addressing issues of wealth disparity, and while they were addressing issues of Bruce Wayne's own, like, is it just that this man exists? Is this a good thing? Is it good that Batman exists? Is this a net positive for us? Or is it actually, like, really in the Batman, without trying to get into too many spoilers, like, the major problem that the city is confronted is that there's this huge portion of wealth that has been extracted from the society, and is basically just sitting in a corner, not doing anything, while Bruce Wayne pouts on top of it, right? And you sympathize with it, like, you sympathize with Bruce Wayne, right? Because he's obviously a man in despair, right? He's obviously obsessed. He's confused, and he doesn't know what to do, and no one around him can like, the guy needs a therapist, like, super bad, right? He needs a therapist, like, unbelievably bad. And, like, to me, one of the, like, most contemptible characters ends up, even though he's presented as being quite sweet and nice, but is Alfred. Like, Alfred is clueless. Like, Alfred does not know what to do about this, and essentially admits it, right? Essentially admits it. And like, Bruce Wayne needs to be grounded. Like, in reality, he needs his feet on the ground. He needs to talk to a therapist. That's what he needs more than anything, right? But nobody around him is making him do that or telling him to do that. Everybody is just allowing him to do this and enabling it at every step of the way. And so the fact that, and so in that way, the film indicts the system of capitalism, not directly, but by simply pointing out that, look at what happens if all you do is allow a billionaire to just sit on the capital. Just give all the money to this guy, and then through the process of his abandonment of the society, because he becomes a recluse, right? He becomes, like, he's, understandably, you sympathize with it, because his parents are murdered. He doesn't know what to do. He's lost in the world, right? All of this. He's disconnected completely. But he's sitting atop this pile of wealth that everyone around him, the mayor of the city is like, hey, we could use that wealth for something, right? The citizens of Gotham are cursing the name of the Waynes, right? Because they abandoned, like, the wealth got extracted from the society, right? And so it's an indictment of the system of capital without going all the way. And that's the reason why I can't really recommend the film ultimately. Because are they ever going to go all the way? Like, that's the real truth. Like, are they ever going to go all the way? Like, Joker went all the way, right? That's why Joker is a film that I could easily recommend. Because Joker said explicitly, Arthur has a mental illness. Arthur is abandoned by his society. Arthur says, what do you get when you abandon a man with mental illnesses? You get what you deserve. Bam. It's explicit. It's right in front of your face. You cannot avoid it. They go all the way. This film, it doesn't go all the way. All the pieces are there. Like it's they that you can tell that the filmmakers understand, right? And they're trying to present like a sympathetic figure to you, which I think they achieve. I actually think they achieve. But they don't go all the way. And they like come right up to the door and they like put their hand on it. You know what I mean? Like when I say go all the way, it's literally like Bruce Wayne needs to realize that Batman is a fantasy, that it is a cruel obsession that he is inflicting on the society, that is doing way more harm than good. Way more harm than good. If Batman existed in this reality, we would curse him as a demon. No one would think that this is a good idea. No, everyone would be like, what in the fuck are you talking about? There's a guy who has a fucking jet shaped like a bat. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, what are you fucking talking about? Right? It's bad enough that we've got billionaires shooting rockets at space and shit, but now you're telling me that they're like customizing it to look like bats so that they can beat up mentally handicapped people? Like, what the fuck? Like, what if Batman existed, I would be sitting here being like, time for full-scale revolt, kids. Like, this is nuts. I would be considered like a Batman villain. And I would gladly embrace that. If Batman existed in this society right now, I would be saying, that's evil. Like, that's evil. How could you not think anything other than that? And I wouldn't put on a goofy outfit, and I wouldn't put on a stupid thing, so that when Batman came to beat the shit out of me, I'd literally just be a dude being like, what's up, kid? How's that mental illness you're obviously suffering from going? That we're all just societally enabling, clearly. We're just allowing a man to walk around in a bat suit, beating up disabled and homeless people with mental illnesses. Why? Because he's rich, clearly? Like, how do you think he has all this shit? How much do you think all this costs? Obviously it costs a shit ton of money. Obviously, look at him. Just look at him. You just need to look at him once, and you're just like, yeah. Like, what, you think those cops, when they look at Batman, they don't think, like, man, how much does any of that cost? Like, how much does their gun cost? Right? They can put fucking 2 and 2 together. Oh, my gun costs like $1,000, right? Like, this is a piece of high-tech hardware. This guy's wearing like big combat boots, armored pants. Like, he's bulletproof. He's wearing like fucking not like shit bulletproof. Not like, oh, and then you go down, right? Like he's wearing like tink 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 tink. Like, he's wearing fucking bulletproof armor and shit. And he's got stuff like detachable hardware and like the guy is walking around in $100,000 worth of hardware that you can see, that's observable. Not to mention all the fucking like contact lenses and like the internal shit. Like, he's wearing like an Iron Man level suit, and you know, like, it's obvious, you can see it. And when he walks into the room, you're like, yeah, how could you think anything other than this guy's rich, right? Like, that to me is where the film does kind of fall apart a little tiny bit. That like, who could this Batman be with these obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of hardware that you can visibly see, that he doesn't hide, that's very clear? Oh, did you hear about the recluse billionaire Bruce Wayne, who's hasn't been seen? That's what I love in the comic books. The character Bane, who's always kind of presented in the movies as being an idiot, or like a zealot of some kind, but in the comic books and in Batman the Animated Series, was always presented as very intelligent. He essentially just puts it together, right? Bane figures out who Batman is. He figures out he's Bruce Wayne, and he literally was like, yeah, a rich guy who has customized bat gear, and a reclusive billionaire like tech giant. Like he just puts it together because it's pretty obvious. And so anyway, you got me on this long scale Batman conversation because I am fascinated by Batman as a cultural character. I'm fascinated to see how he has evolved, and he has evolved. This is a clear evolution. But the question that I will put down on the table is: are they going to go all the way? Is Bruce Wayne going to actually admit and realize that Batman is harmful, he doesn't help, he does more harm than good, and that the true path for a man like Bruce Wayne is to give your money to the poor? That's the only satisfying end arc for Batman. The idea that the ending point for Batman is forever vigilant, fight crime forever, is to me an abomination. I view that as abhorrent. Like a society that says such a thing out loud to itself is despicable, and you can't forgive it. But a society that says an eternal quest of violence is a mistake. It doesn't help. Violence begets violence, which this Batman film essentially states, and that the proper thing for someone like Bruce Wayne to do is to give up the mantle and give your money to the poor. Right? And unless they actually make that statement, give your money to the poor, then I don't know what they're telling the story for. It's like when I watched Harry Potter, right? Like there are certain stories that have an obvious conclusion. Like the story has to go there, and if it doesn't go there, then I'm like, why did they tell the story? And so like in Harry Potter, the character Snape, right? So Snape betrays Dumbledore, right? And kills Dumbledore. And when he did it, I was just like, nah, he's still good. Like, I never believed it, right? I always believed that it was part of a larger plan and that Snape was ultimately good. I always believed it. And when it came out that that was the case, I was like, yeah, it had to be that way, right? Or because if it's not that way, then it discredits Dumbledore as a character completely. Like, Dumbledore is unrepentant, like or unredeemable. Can't be redeemed as a character. If at the end of the day it was all just a bamboozle and Snape got him, right? No, it can't be that way. Just structurally, and it would make the entire piece just go, like it wouldn't work. It's far more satisfying and logical. It has to be the conclusion that Snape ultimately was good. Or on the right side, at least. And and I feel this way about the Batman trilogy. It's going to be a trilogy, obviously. And I mean, if they can make it a quadrilogy, they'll definitely do it. But chances are good that the actor himself will be like, nah, 3 is good. But if in the end he's not like, yeah, Batman's got to go, I'm just going to give all my money to the poor. If that's not the end of it, I don't know why they told me this story. Like, I don't know why. So I can't recommend it because we're not there yet. But so far so good. Good first outing. Good first outing. Right? And I could keep talking about it. You guys know me. I could keep fucking talking. Now I'm tempted to get into like the technical aspects of it. Right? The makeup was amazing. Right? Like the makeup that they put on what's his face. Right? On Colin Firth. It's probably the best film makeup ever done. Probably. Yeah. Yeah, Soviet Superman is the worst offender. I completely agree with this, Compton. I completely agree with this. Like, the Superman Red Sun. Yeah, we need a new Batman Red Sun with the communist Batman. You both at the same time are just like thinking about that kind of story. No, Superman Red Sun was obvious capitalist propaganda. Like, obvious. It doesn't take... you don't need to go too deep into it. to see that that's obviously the case. Like, imagine having unlimited strength, intelligence, speed, was taught about communism and dialectic materialism, and somehow the USSR wasn't just a post-scarcity society. Yeah. Like, exactly. Right? That, like, the character of Superman, the author that has absolutely pegged Superman, the capitalistic vision or version of Superman the best is Frank Miller. Frank Miller really nailed Superman and really came to understand who Superman would have to be, right? If he existed in an actual America, right? Like, if he existed in actual America, he would have to be an imperialist. He would have to be a lapdog of the U.S. military. He would have to be, right? Because it's the only thing that could make him make sense, right? Like, because if he actually stood for truth and justice, and if he actually stood for some kind of greater purpose, his greatest villain in the world today would be the United States military. It wouldn't be close, right? Like, he would have to, because, like, just pick anything, pick any conflict that the United States has gotten involved in since the 80s, right? Or like the 60s, whenever Superman shows up. Isn't that what Captain America is? What's interesting, like, and Captain America, like, they basically just, like, what they've done in Captain America comics, like how they've squared this circle in the Marvel verse, right? DC is going about it a little bit more honestly, where, like, they are essentially, if you actually read some of these comics, you're like, oh, Superman is like a dictator. Like, he has taken control and basically been like, you humans cannot do this. And so they've created, like, an alternative reality where Superman basically says to the United States military, stand down. And they've basically said, you got it. And that to me is a more honest path for these superheroes and with a character like Superman. Whereas the Marvel solution to this problem is to just create an alternative reality where the United States military is good, right? That's why the Marvel movies, in my view, are very harmful and are essentially fascist propaganda. They're not explicitly fascist propaganda, not like the type of fascist propaganda that's going to come. Like, the fascist propaganda that's coming is going to be very aggressive and obvious, and the people that love it will be very obvious about it. But Marvel movies and comics are essentially fascist propaganda because they present a world in which the United States military is ultimately good and doing the right thing and fighting legitimate threats, right? That organizations like Hydra and villains like the Red Skull and all this kind of stuff are, like, legitimate threats and are tied in to the overt stereotypical racism that one expects to see from fascist propaganda, right? That instead of going in to invade Afghanistan, they're going in to invade some kind of fake location that doesn't really exist, right? So they call it, like, Afghanistan or something, right? And yeah, Triumph of the Will type stuff is coming. Absolutely. Like, absolutely. It's not going to be, it's going to be presented unapologetically. It's going to be celebrated. You will have a counter commentary that occurs, obviously. Like, that's definitely going to happen, but there's going to be huge sections of the population that are just like, yeah, this is the greatest, right? And are not really, they don't really care what you think. I think that's the thing that is going to be very unsettling for a lot of progressive liberal types, is that the fascists will let them spin their tires and scream about it, and then just sneer at them and go like, yeah, but you're fucking weak. Like, look how weak and pathetic you are, whinging about this. What are you gonna do? Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, that's what's gonna happen, because the fascists are not going to be interested in like some kind of philosophical checkmate, right? That to them the only time, or the only interest they will have in engaging in the debate at all is just to confound, right? And because they view it as a game, because it doesn't there's no consequences for them, right? So they're just playing with you in the same kind of way that like a cat plays with a mouse before it kills it, right? To them, it's just a game. And should you actually get them into a corner philosophically, well, they've always got their trump card, and their trump card is pull out a gun and shoot you, because they're always willing to do that, right? That's always in their playbook, right? Like they don't care if you refute them. It doesn't matter to them. Like and the more audacious they can make the conversation, and the more they can get you red-faced and confused and frustrated, the happier that will make them. Yeah, it happens now. Liberals and sock Dems tut about the right acts, but hasn't got the guts to confront them. Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Like, and you can see it. I mean, again, we find ourselves talking about a figure like Jordan Peterson, right? Like, the things that Peterson are saying are too stupid for a person to actually believe. Just straight up. Like, they're just too stupid. Like, there's no way that he genuinely believes the things that he's saying. I'm at that point with this guy. Like, it's too stupid. And he exists only to exacerbate and to make the conversation more difficult on purpose, for his own amusement and the benefit of the people who are paying him to do it. Like, that's the only thing. That's the only reason he exists. Because he's just. I started thinking this way about him when he started talking about climate change, the way that he's been talking about it. I'm like, these things are too stupid for a person to believe. There's no way that like a Harvard-educated, like University of Toronto professor would ever believe something so fucking stupid. It's too stupid. Like he's selling his intelligence. Like he's selling himself out. Yeah, look how Biden simps for good Republicans in the face of the party turning to an openly fascist form. I mean, but honestly, like my view is that the establishment Democrats are just revealing that they were also fascists all along, right? This idea that they're not. What are you talking about? Like, you know, like Obama and Biden have been involved in imperial warfare, right? Like one of my favorite things when I get talking about like the capitalism fascism distinction, right? That people get really caught up in. And I like to say, I don't really see a distinction between capitalists and fascists. Like, I legitimately think that they are the same thing. The thing I really love to say is, yeah, I'm sure the people of Iraq are really happy that they got bombed by capitalists and not fascists. Really sure the people of Afghanistan are sitting there being like, oh, thank God it was capitalists. I'm really sure that the people of Yemen are like, oh, well, at least we're undergoing a genocide that's being caused by capitalists and not fascists, right? Really sure the Palestinians are sitting there being like, okay, but it'd be worse if these were fascists, right? Thank God they're capitalists. Like the people of Somalia, people of Libya, right? I'm sure they're all sitting there just being like, oh, God, okay. I didn't realize that these were not fascist bombs, but these were capitalist bombs. That changes everything, right? Like I'm sure that when Chile got overthrown, right? Like when I'm so sure that when all of the shit that went down in Laos and Cambodia, right, when that all happened, I'm sure they were all sitting there being like, oh, these are Democrat capitalist, these are social democratic bombs. Laos has 200,000 set off mines littered throughout the country, but they're capitalist progressive mines, so it's different. You know, like I just think that the distinctions that get made are based on the premise that they are different in the first place. They're assumed to be different from the outset. And so when you assume that the difference exists, you create like a whole justification for it. But in reality, they're the same. They're the same thing. Like, it's like looking at Hannibal Lecter when he's sitting in a chair reading a book and saying, oh, he's not a serial killer. It's like, yes, he is. He's just not currently in the state of killing someone like a serial killer, right? He's just sitting in a chair reading a book, right? Like the more efficacious question. How do you like that? How do you like that? There's a $5 word for you guys. Efficacious. The more efficacious question would be when does capitalism use violence and when does it turn against itself and its own citizens? That to me is the better question. Not when does capitalism become fascism, because in my view it's always fascism. It's the same thing. The better question is, when does capitalism use violence against its own citizens? Like, that to me is a more fundamentally interesting question, which I think is more rooted in the actual truth of how it actually works, right? That fascism doesn't actually exist. It's just a concept that comes out of World War II that gets applied to the Italians initially, right? It was the fascist party, right? The word fascism is an Italian word that I think means party, right? Or like male or something like that. So it's literally a party, like liberal or conservative, right? And then it just gets kind of applied, right? In the way that we have like the axis of evil, right? So it's like a propaganda term, right? And I genuinely believe that the capitalists pick it up and begin to use it so that they can create a distinction between capitalists, right? Because ultimately, like, people like Mussolini and Hitler are capitalists, right? They worked for capitalists. They worked for capitalism. Sure, they might have had different ideas that were a bit more aggressive, but they worked for industrial capital. And so I think that the capitalists of the UK and France and of America glommed on to this word fascist to apply it to these people to create a distinction. And I feel like it gets used as a shield in many cases so that capitalists can point at other capitalists who are doing what capitalists do and say, they're fascists. Like when capitalists get caught out finally, right? When a group of capitalists get caught out, other capitalists can turn on those capitalists and say, oh, they're fascists. Oh my goodness. We've got to protect capitalism from these fascists that are definitely different and are attacked, right? But so this phrase that you just said here, fascism rears its head when a bourgeoisie state is threatened from the proletariat below. If you replace the word fascism with capitalism, it's the same statement. They're the same thing. They're the same thing. Like I don't see a difference. I think that lots of people have created a difference and have begun with the assumption. And I think this is true of like the seminal works on fascism, which are good. Like they're good. I'm not trying to discount the analysis and any of that kind of stuff. But the assumption is that capitalism and fascism are different when I make the statement that they are not, that they are the same. That capitalism rears its head when a bourgeoisie state is threatened from the proletariat below. Right? And so the naming of it as fascism, I think, ultimately helps the capitalists because it allows them to draw a line in the sand and pretend like the capitalists that they are fighting are somehow different than them. And then also allows them to create this idea that there is a good capitalism, right? Because that's fascism. We're capitalists, right? So maybe you could say we're not great, but we're definitely better than fascists, when in truth they're the same thing and they're the same. The ruling class looks at fascists as literal clowns, but they need those clowns to smash the working class. Yeah, I mean, if you... not really. Trotsky says that it's the capitalists' turn to fascism when they lose the veneer of democracy. But in that statement, so the capitalists turn to violence when they lose the veneer of democracy, right? Because that's all it is. That's what they're doing. To me, that's no different than saying Hannibal Lecter will stab you in the chest if you reveal that he's a serial killer, right? Like if you try to arrest Hannibal Lecter, he'll stab you in the chest. Like he'll use violence. We don't need to this created term. In my view, the term fascism is it's adding complexity where none exists, which is a tactic of the ruling class. They do it all the time. Take a look at the field of economics. It's done all the time, and it's done on purpose, in my view. Make simple things complex. The more complexity that you can make, and the more difficult you make things to understand, the more obscure and abstract. If you can create entire other languages for people to have to go through to obfuscate things that are in essence very simple, the better you will be. I see it all the time when we get talking about economics. Like the entire field of economics is riddled with it. And I look at the distinction between fascism and capitalism with the same light. That it exists exclusively to make the simple complex on purpose. Yeah, show us the part in history where capital establishing its rule was popularly supported. Yeah, so do the First Nations people, when they were getting a genocide, were they like, oh, well, thank God it's capitalism and not fascism? Were the black slaves, when they were getting transported over to the United States, were they sitting there being like, oh, well, thank God this is capitalism, not fascism, right? Like when the Germans, when the Nazis were using Manifest Destiny and using segregation to write their laws, where they're like, well, this will actually really improve things because these are capitalist ideas, not fascist ideas. So this will make this more acceptable, right? The bourgeoisie came into power through violence, and it is its natural states. Fascism is its modern form, but again, capitalism is its modern form, right? What's the actual true distinction? It's the distinction is made up. It's been made up to confuse and make complex that which is quite simple, right? That in essence, fascism is when capitalism uses its fist. Okay, so when capitalism does violence, it's fascism. Or when capitalism does away with the veneer of democracy, it's fascism. No, capitalism is its economic form of wealth accumulation. Okay, I'm fine with having this conversation. If you want to show me why this is important, I will definitely walk down this garden path with you. But I feel like I've stated my position pretty clearly that we use the term fascism, and in a way it's a kind of psychological self-denial, right? Oh no, we're capitalists, right? We're capitalists, right? We're better than those fascists. They're fascists, right? Near as I can tell, when it's a capitalist, when we attack a brown nation or a nation of brown people, or a foreign nation, right? So when we attack a foreign nation, it's and steal their resources and all that, it's capitalism. But if we get attacked by a capitalist nation, it's fascism. That seems to be the only distinction that exists that makes any sense. So, like, if we attack Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, it's capitalism. But if Russia attacks Ukraine, it's fascism. That seems to be the distinction. It's no small wonder why fascism came to prominence almost directly after the Russian Revolution. Well, I mean, again, like, fascism is the name of the political party, right? Like, and the fascists, like, that's the name that gets used because they don't want to call themselves the capitalist party, right? No, it's imperialism, which is a direct outgrowth of capitalism. I kind of, like, I don't think you actually get a non-imperialistic capitalism. Like, I feel like capitalism by its very nature, like, in a way I understand why people want to make these distinctions, but I feel like my view of it is a bit more holistic, I suppose. Like, a 10-year-old and a 30-year-old, right, are still the same person, although they have changed, and there are reasons for why they have changed. And the distinctions of when they are at the age that they are important, I suppose. But I wouldn't ever call them anything but their name, right? Now that's Jeffrey, right? Like, you're Jeffrey, right? And you're 10, you're Jeffrey. You're 30, you're Jeffrey. You're 80, you're Jeffrey, right? And wow, did you see what Jeffrey did? And at no point would I be like, well, Jeffrey is George now because he punched that guy. We got to find out when Jeffrey becomes George and when he does that violence, right? And like, I just don't see the distinction or the shift in the same kind of way. Perhaps you're not a Marxist if you have issues with these terms? Gasp. I'm not sure we have issues with these things. I find it simple to understand the differences. Like, first of all, Watson, the classic accusing someone of not being a Marxist? Gasp. I don't take it badly. No, I just think that people are, like, I think that the term fascism is used as a shield, right? I've been thinking about this way for a long time. Like, I think that it's a way for capitalists to protect themselves. John, why did you lie to us all this time when your name being Jeffrey? No. Like, but again, like, what is the difference? I don't really understand what the difference actually is. Like, I don't think you have successfully shown me what that difference is. Like, so the bourgeois, you had a good statement here, right? Capitalism turns to fascism when they lose the veneer of democracy. Like, I mean, I feel like there's all kinds of examples. Milo, buddy. Oh. Like, is it simply that? Is it simply that fascism is when we do it to ourselves? Is that the simplest definition? Is that the simplest distinction? That if we do it all around the rest of the world, right? If we do it in Libya, if we do it in South America, Africa, across the Middle East, across Southeast Asia, it's capitalism. But if we do it to ourselves, it's fascism. Is that the distinction? Because, like, I don't know why we create that distinction, except to protect our own selves and our own ego. That, no, we can't possibly be fascists, even though we definitely are. Like, even though we definitely are acting in exactly the same way that we would expect anything that we have ever called fascist. The best way I can say it is that fascism starts out as an internal mechanism for class control. Once again, once again, I find myself being like, how is that different than capitalism? Like, how is that different than capitalism? Like, I just feel like we've got two different words for the same thing. Okay. Let's This is a fun conversation though. But because like I like I'm suspicious that we have two different words for the same thing. And I began asking myself, why do we have two words for the same thing? No, it's not that I'm confused. Like, my position is that you are making something more complex than it need be. That's my position. That it's more simple than you're making it. That you're creating a distinction where none exists. And the distinction exists in order to protect capital. That's why the distinction exists. That it doesn't exist in order to define or figure something out that is distinct or different from how capitalism operates. That it exists so that capitalists can say, oh, the way that those capitalists act is fascism and therefore bad. When, by any observation whatsoever, every capitalist country has always acted this way. They're not this, but then show it. Show me how they're not the same. Like, these two things are different, and I can show it. Is a veneer that important? Yeah, like if Hannibal Lecter is smiling, is he different than when he's frowning? No. And again, I think it's important to state, I think that the people who were commenting on fascism, and like a lot of people, right? And there's a lot of really good work on fascism and the fascist societies and all this kind of stuff. I think it's good work. But it assumes the difference, right? The base precept at the very beginning is that capitalism and fascism are different, right? And that there is a leaping that happens when, I mean, is like imperialist Britain much different than imperialist Germany? Like what's the real, like, what I feel like I'm seeing is authors commenting on a social phenomenon and observing it and attempting to define something, and through their defining of it, they actually end up talking about capitalism. One is an economic structure to maintain wealth and power through wealth accumulation, right? I mean, and violence, pretty clearly. And the other is, honestly, I would argue that fascism is a conservative value. Yes, liberals will collaborate with fascists. However, the difference between the two is when you have a group of people who wants to use. Fascism is the ideological system to maintain that wealth accumulation through societal force. Okay, now we're getting into something a little bit more interesting, I think. Like, one is an economic structure to maintain wealth and power through wealth accumulation, which is capital. So, like, the raw sort of economic positioning and argument of it. Whereas fascism is the ideological system instead of the economic system. Oops. Watson just starts screaming, that force is used when the ruling class is threatened from revolt from below. That'd be crazy, dude. Like, I'm sitting here just like casually talking about this. I'm like sitting here actually kind of pondering, like, is this interesting content? Are people tuning out of this? I'm having a great time with this. I find this subject to be quite fascinating. I find this to be quite bad. But on the other side, Watson is being like... No, I know you're not, dude. I know you're not. Who wants to use direct government power to uphold some sort of religious ideology and capitalist system while the liberals simply collaborate with them but speak like leftists? Yeah. I would be careful about that because one could equate other economic systems, like communism, to fascism. No, I have always found the equating communism to fascism as absurd on the face of it. Like at its base, like, fascism literally says, let's purge the Jews. Like, let's use violence to purge, right? Like, let's grab people and put them in camps and, like, purge the society and all that kind of stuff. Whereas communism is literally like, everyone should have food, right? Like, on its face, it's absurd. And the more you dig into it, the more absurd the distinction becomes. Okay, what's the purpose of fascism as opposed to the purpose of capitalism? That might help. Well, again, my point is that they're the same. So the purpose of fascism and the purpose of capitalism is to keep rich people rich, right? To keep capital in the hands of the few. That's the point of both. I find your distinction of one is an ideological system versus one is an economic system to be your most successful argument to date so far. That was the moment where I kind of went, okay, like if that's the distinction that you want to make, that's more interesting. Because talking about capitalism exclusively as a system of economics, very nuts and bolts, dollar bills, money, resources, how goods and services are moved around and that kind of thing. But fascism is more akin to a societal or cultural force of like almost a religion, right? That it's more about social manipulation and social control, and uses violence as a form of social control. That the violence that comes out of capitalism as a system is almost somehow a byproduct, whereas with fascism it's the point, right? And that I could be mistaking the byproduct for the point under capitalism, whereas with fascism the violence is the point. Like, there's no such thing as a fascist who isn't interested in using violence, but there is such a thing as a capitalist that's not interested in using violence, even though the system generates violence. That's an interesting position. That's something for me to ponder on a little bit more, I think, Watson, because because I do say that, like, we are fighting, even though, like, we point out that there are evil people in the society, for sure. There are evil people, and there are chauvinists and misogynists and frauds and all this kind of stuff. For sure, the true villain of the piece is the system. And the system we're fighting against, ultimately, is an economic system and an economic structure, which at its core says the means of production are in the hands of a very small few, and that gives them decision-making power. And because of their narrow perspective and their narrow view, they will ultimately make decisions that benefit themselves at the expense of other people. And that's systemic, and that's the system. Whereas, and so that is ultimately what we are trying to confront. And that is different from fascism, because fascism is an explicit statement of violence for the sake of violence, truthfully. Milo, no more, dude. You're just being annoying. No more. Yeah, this is a fairly technical argument, I think Watson, I actually think you're being a bit successful here. I have to say, like, I think that you are changing my mind a bit. That that capitalism is understood as a kind of on a more nuts and bolts sort of level, and that fascism is not the nuts and bolts level. It is the cultural force. It is like the society, which ultimately is attempting to protect that economic system, but that economic system is itself different from the cultural forces that arise from it. It does, but not to give up my own position so easily. It does sort of beg the question of, like, does the system of capital ultimately end up in a fascist place? And that, I've been using this analogy a lot, which is like, you have a serial killer like Hannibal Lecter, right? And he has, although that's not a tight analogy given what you've been saying, so I need to find a better analogy, because we have a machine, right? Capitalism is the machine, right? Fascism is the spirit, right, that arises from the machine. And as long as the machine is allowed and permitted to turn its gears with no complaint for who it rides over or what it does, then it will go along with that silently. But fascism arises when people turn against the machine. It's like a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. Yeah, and Cotton's hitting on it a little bit too. Hold on, I don't want to skip over anything, because this is a really good conversation. Like, I think we need to have serious conversations about fascism as we experience a fascist moment, without a doubt. Like, without a doubt, we are experiencing. Certainly, capitalism is turning against itself. Like, if I wanted to maintain that there is a lack of a distinction, capitalism is turning against itself without a doubt. That's the point. If there's no threat to the ruling class, fascism not required, yeah. What happens to the upper middle class in communism? Those that are neither poor nor disabled nor oligarchs. I mean, one assumes they kind of continue down their merry way, except they own the means of production, right? Like, they... Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy. Okay. I know, you're complaining, but then you get belly rubs, and then you're happy about it. I know, and then you give me licks. What happens to the upper middle class in communism? Those that are neither poor nor disabled nor oligarchs? Well, one assumes that in communism they would own the means of production now. So they would continue doing the work that they have been doing, but now they would have decision-making power, right? And that they would be the authority on what occurs with their own work, right? That's the theory anyway. Whether or not that actually bears out is another story, but that's sort of the idea, that you maintain your job or your social position, but instead of negotiating with a class of owners, you're negotiating amongst each other about how to move forward and finding consensus with your fellow workers who are also engaged in the same enterprise. Isn't that right? Isn't that right, Milo? Everybody's engaged in the same enterprise. So instead of there being worthless capitalists who are trying to take your surplus value for themselves, you get to keep it. You get to keep it. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Milo agrees. That is nice. When the class antagonisms of capitalism sharpen and mass revolt becomes a real possibility, the ruling class turns to fascism. And your view, because I will admit that perhaps I'm being a bit reductive when I'm talking about fascism, as fascism is not simply violence, right? That's certainly a hallmark, but there is more to it, right? There is like the cultural force of it, the cultural backing of it, is what is actually interesting, and that fascism. I mean, you think about like the Third Reich, right? With like the jackboots, the swastika everywhere, the theater, the pageantry, the 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 cultural shift that capitalism is more into appropriation. Like capitalism just wears the skin of the culture, right? Like like the LGBTQ stuff, like when corporations start being like it's Pride Month, LGBTQ, and all that kind of stuff, right? It's a form of appropriation, right? And that's how capitalism works. Whereas fascism, I think, by what you're trying to say, and please correct me if I'm going down the wrong path with this, that fascism is itself its own culture. That it doesn't take the culture of other, it doesn't appropriate cultures, it doesn't put on the skin of other cultures, or try to pretend as though we're all in it together, or pretend like we're all buddies. It's not trying to smile at you. It's not trying to slither into what you're doing. It's its own culture. And it comes in and it goes, no, this is what we're doing now, right? It's things have gotten out of hand. You are threatening the machine. And so we have to come through and sweep by with our hand and say, of whatever you're doing out in the culture, that all needs to go away. And the dominant group of the ruling class, straight white men, needs to reassert itself in big and serious ways. I feel like that distinction is an interesting one, and definitely worth more contemplation of that fascism is its own culture, that it's not appropriating a culture, it's its own culture. I think that's an interesting point. I think if you want to get technical, fascism is when capitalism creates auxiliary social capital to maintain the more concrete dialectical stratification. Yeah, there can be secular fascism. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that, I mean, it was definitely true in Germany, and it's certainly the truth in America, that fascists, and I think it's probably because, as Watson, I think, now correctly points out, because of its ideological positioning and its cultural positioning, it seeks to merge with the popular religion. That the Nazis were in bed with the religious forces that existed in the society. Just as, like, these are evangelical Christians, right? These are the guys that I grew up with, right? Evangelical Christians. And these guys, these Republican fascists, are definitely going to be holding onto a cross while they do what they're about to do. And while I agree with you, there can be a secular fascism, I think that could probably only happen if the society itself was already completely secularized, which America has not been secularized. This is a really interesting conversation. I like having my mind changed, and I feel like, Watson, you're like right on it. I think you're pushing me in the right direction here. Which I've been thinking this way about fascism and capitalism for a long, long time. And so this is really tickling my brain. I think fascism also involves political systems changing themselves so they aren't responsible for upholding things for rights. Like, all your rights to be read, your Miranda rights, are gone, right? Roe v. Wade, right? Your right to your own body autonomy, all of that kind of stuff, right? They aren't responsible for, because ultimately, like, the ideology of something like fascism really is like might makes right. That we win because we have the force to do so. Why are so many patriot groups showing up in this period? Yeah, like I agree with your assessment that what is called fascism shows up. Like when the machine is threatened, this cultural force, like the machine itself is capitalism, and the culture it generates and creates to protect itself as a security system is fascism. And I think that's a pretty okay analogy given what you're saying, because capitalism is the mechanism, and the culture that's being created is being created and generated by those who control the mechanism, right? Yeah, and the more I'm talking about this, the more I think it is right to create this distinction. I think, Watson, I think you're turning me, man. Like, I really do. Like because I feel like I've said it already before, but I'm saying it for myself again, that capitalism is the machine, and the machine is soulless. That it's like the One Ring of Sauron. It's just power, right? It's just a machine. And the critique of the machine is that the machine should be shaped differently. Like, we could structure the machine differently, right? And we could alter it. And if it wasn't for the fact that there are humans who own that machine and operate that machine and exclude other humans from it, that that we could probably do that fairly successfully, right? That it would be like just a patch. It would just be like a systems patch on a video game or something, right? That, oh, this isn't really working. The outcomes are not very bad. We can analyze it and change it, right? But that's not the case. I think I'm coming into maybe this articulation is useful. Maybe that capitalism is, when we're talking about capitalism, we are talking about a system, about a machine, about a structure of some kind. But when we're talking about fascism, we're talking about humanity. Because the system of capital, the way it operates and the way it occurs, is a systemic kind of machination. That it always will act this way because this is the way that it's structured to act. Whereas fascism and the way it acts has more to do with how humans are and how humans think and what happens when humans think that something is threatened, right? That if a person feels that something they hold dear is existentially threatened, then they will act in this way. But the thing that is being threatened is itself distinct from the way the human acts. I think that's kind of... I think that is an important distinction, actually. Like that actually does feel like an important distinction, because if you critique capitalism, you're critiquing the machine. But if you critique fascism, you're critiquing humans. You're critiquing humanity itself. And I think that is a very important distinction now that we're talking about it this way. Yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys are saying about this, because this is a fascinating conversation for me. This is a fascinating... I just always worry that distinctions get made where they don't need to exist. And so I always challenge them. Violence to smash a potential revolt by the proletariat, yeah. I think the political system's changing point speaks to Watson's point about fascism being ideology rather than capitalism being material relations, yeah. I think John is basically saying that capital is bound to use fascism as an inescapable consequence. But now I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit differently, Content, which is it like the machine is not the thing that's using fascism, right? That it's us that's using fascism to protect the machine. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. That this is a real intellectual struggle session right here. I wasn't expecting this today. This is good. Thanks for being here. Like, share, subscribe. Give me some money. I hope this is interesting content. I think that John is basically saying that capitalism is bound to use fascism as an inescapable consequence. Yeah, and I think a critique. I think that is a correct assessment of what I was previously saying, but that I think it could be critiqued in saying that capitalism is just a machine, that it's not the thing that's using it, right? That it's just that this is just the system and how it operates, but that fascism is what happens when we threaten that machine, right? When the small group of people that own the machine and have structured it out of the self-interested decisions that it will always occur because of the narrow view that they have, then fascism is what occurs. But it's not the machine of capital that creates the fascism. It's the people that own the machine that create fascism. Yeah. Does the system ultimately end up in this form? Yes, because the system also tends to monopoly. It takes more and more terrible forms of exploitation to maintain that wealth. Right. And again, though, that's a critique of humanity more than it's a critique of the machine. Yep, and once governments declare themselves to not be responsible for withholding rights, they do it more and more, of course. The fascists will do everything in their power, that there's no distinction between the rich and the poor. They're all the same people, but they follow the interests of the state, like making their country great again. There's also much protectionism and always having a scapegoat for all people of the ills. Oh, a scapegoat, yeah. Like the LGBTQ immigrant leftist movement. Yeah, because the people who own the machine never want you to point the finger at them. They always want to blame somebody else. They always want to scapegoat onto somebody else, which is just like a classic deflection strategy, right? That's just a... Upper middle class is the petty bourgeoisie. That's a long question about what happens to them. Remember, the change to socialism is an evolutionary one, and it doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. John is a post-traditional neo-Hegelian. That's why he's being messy. Oh wow, that's a big a post-traditional. That's correct though. I'm definitely post-traditional. Like I don't value tradition for tradition's sake. That I think that traditions need to justify themselves. For sure. That if you're doing something and the only reason you can give me for why you're doing it is tradition, that's not good enough. And if I can show you that it's harmful, then it should be stopped. For sure, I think that's the case. Neo-Hegelian. Bro, what have you done? Neo-Hegelian. The philosophy of a school of chiefly British and American idealists. I mean, I don't know if I'm an idealist, but following Hegel in his logical method and emphasizing organismic. How dare you make me read this word? Organismic. Because you know that I'm sitting here being like orgasmic, right? Like you know that I'm sitting here looking at this and being like orgasmic. Or organismic rather than atomistic conceptions. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't I think that's right. I don't really go along with like I respect the atomistic view of things. Like there are atoms and then protons and all that kind of stuff, but I don't necessarily find that to be particularly useful. Do you know what I mean? Like we are organisms. Oh my god. You're gonna make me do a whole lot of reading, aren't you, Compton? Just so I can be like, no. Or maybe yes. I don't know. George William Frederick Hegel. Yeah, I mean, I know Hegel. I never have done like a huge deep dive into Hegel. I feel like I'm far more influenced, honestly, by. Um, I do feel like I'm more influenced by my Christian upbringing than anything else. Like what happens when you are a fundamentalist Christian who ceases being a fundamentalist Christian, but you keep reading theology? Like, and instead of attempting to understand it as a um, as a as a literal, as like Jesus is coming back and all that kind of stuff, and as you attempt to understand it. Oh, and you know what? I got to start saying this more and more out loud because I was thinking about this the other night. And I think it's absolutely true. I think also a big influence of mine has been William Shakespeare. I just don't think that I can justifiably exclude him any longer, and nor do I think he should be excluded as a legitimate intellectual and a legitimate thinker. It's just his method of communicating his thoughts and his method of communicating his philosophy of life is done through plays instead of essays. That clearly Shakespeare was a highly intelligent, highly attuned, highly moral thinker who definitely was interested in influencing his society and had ideas about feminism, homosexuality, anti-Semitism, wealth disparity, without a doubt. Like, without a doubt. You just read his stuff. Like, see it mounted. Watch his stuff, right? Like, it's impossible. And honestly, like, as we go along with this idea, I've got to say straight up, Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's just no way for me to deny it anymore. There are so many situations in my life where I'm like, oh, that's like this Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. Like, there's this great Star Trek: The Next Generation episode that I think about all the time called Darmok. What brilliant, 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 brilliant episode that I always think about constantly. I've been thinking about it the entire time we've been having this discussion, which is it's an episode. The plot. The Enterprise makes contact with a Temerian ship in orbit around the planet El Adrel. The Temerians have been previously contacted by the Federation, but could not be understood. Although the Universal Translator can translate their words, they communicate by using brief allusions to their history and mythology to convey thoughts and intentions. Likewise, the Temerians cannot understand Captain Picard's straightforward use of language, right? And I feel like this episode really illustrated something that I think happens a lot in society. That although we are using the same like semantic language, we use words differently to mean different things, and like theology is like this a lot. And theologians of the past are like this a lot. Like, what is the blood of the Lamb or the Holy Trinity or any of that? Like, I can explain it to you, and you can like look at it and understand each word and all of that, but you won't really understand what it is until you understand what it is. And the only way to understand what it is to go through the story and be told the story and the illusion and the metaphor, right? And I feel like a lot of the conflict that happened between the new atheists and the churches is rooted in this type of communication and this inability to understand one another, because one group believes that it's communicating in a very straightforward sort of a way, and the other group is communicating through illusion, myth, allegory, and that there are misunderstandings that arise because of this. And when you sift through those differences, you find out that, and especially when you start, I feel like the keystone is Isaac Newton. That Isaac Newton, in many ways, is the keystone in that particular discussion, because Isaac Newton was a theologian and also a brilliant scientist, and wrote a little tract, like a 2-pager, where he talks about like the nature of God, that I think can be completely understandable by anybody, and that Newton's understanding of God, I don't think, would be too much different than a quantum physicist's understanding of the universe, if that quantum physicist believed or understood or accepted that the universe itself is intelligent. And so there's like this new emerging language that I feel comes out of this understanding, to try to merge the old theological way of speaking with the new scientific way of speaking. And that it's primarily semantic, the misunderstandings between us. Anyway. But yeah, I genuinely do feel that I can't deny it. Like, Star Trek The Next Generation has been extremely influential for me. The works of Shakespeare, no two ways about it. And yeah, like the theological, like the Bible, I've read the Bible so many times I can't deny it anymore, right? It's just that I don't think that magic is real. Anyway, so I don't know about this like the truth is that and I'm seeing like after his death diverged into 3 schools of thought. The conservative rightist religions who developed this philosophy with Christian teachings. There you go, right? Conservative politics, the young Hegelians or leftists, a group including Karl Marx, Engels. Like, I came to communism fairly late in my life, really. Like, if I wanted to be like really honest about it, like I came to communism like in my 30s. So it's the most recent development. All right. That was a big divergence there. Holy cow. I feel like today's episode is just me being as selfish as I can be. I'm literally like, this is what I want to talk about, so I'm going to talk about it. Oh well. I get one every so often, right? I get one every so often, don't I? There's a few great Trotsky quotes that explain this really well, but they're a bit long for this forum. Mussolini, co-author of the Fascist Manifesto, said it best. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, as it's the merger of state and corporate power. Yes, I've used that quote on several occasions too. So if one understands the class divisions in bourgeoisie society, that quote lifts the veil of what the ruling class ultimately wants. Well, like what the ruling class ultimately wants is it wants people to obey them and just stay as a cog in the machine. Like, that's what they want. That I've been talking a lot about capitalism as a machine, but it's because capitalism, like, the people are the machine. And so once the people start revolting and it starts shaking the machine, well, then the cultural force of capitalism, of fascism rather, comes around. I like this distinction, Watson, this distinction between like the more mechanistic view of the system of capital versus the cultural force of fascism. Because you're right. Like, I do think that you are successfully arguing the distinction. But keep in mind that fascism and capitalism goes hand in hand. Yeah. Now, another thing, the identity issues you say are the main issues of fascism are not, in fact, they simply are diversions to take advantage of the demoralization this system creates. Now, another thing, the identity issues you say are the main issues of fascism are not, in fact, They are simply the diversions to take. So first of all, I don't think I understand the statement that I don't understand this. That the identity issues you say are the main issues of fascism are not, in fact, they are simply diversions to take advantage of the demoralization the system creates. Yeah, I don't think I understand that, bud. Sorry. I think I'm misinterpreting something here. There's a great book called The State of Exception from Giorgio Agamben about the way states change to make themselves legally not responsible for upholding rights. Man. Like, isn't that like the most, like, if I'm living in a country and that country stands up and goes, yeah, we don't need to care about these people, doesn't that just like completely delegitimize? Like, just, like, I know it doesn't happen that way. I know it's not like the state stand up and going, well, I'm not going to pay attention to these rights anymore. You know, like it's a bit more, but it does seem to me like the only reason a state can justify its existence is if it's upholding the rights of its citizens. Like, we don't need to follow the rules of something that's like, yeah, I'm going to enslave you. Like, nah, yeah, we don't need to pay attention to that. Right? We don't need to pay attention to that. Maybe this will help. A video David North on YouTube calls What is Fascism? That video might help understand this a bit better. It's about 10 minutes long. All right. Oh, also, like, you can't deny Chomsky and Hedges. Like, I think that they're very, like, modern writers that I definitely, like, I've read literally everything Hedges has written. I have not read everything Chomsky has written, of course, because he's written a billion things. No. Okay, the ruling class is using fascism to violently maintain the machine, not us, because they will use that violence against us. But I do think that, like, there's a certain element of people get caught up in fascism even though it's not benefiting them. Right? That, like, the heroic story, right? That you are your own hero and you are the author of your fate, and that kind of hero's journey story of grand egoism that exists within the kind of the fantasy that fascism presents is like, it's self-destructive. Like, lots of the people that were real pro-fascists end up getting completely owned and destroyed utterly because they're caught up in kind of the hysteria of it. The ruling class using, like, because the ruling class itself, like, there's not that many of them, right? They need a thug class. They need police. They need warriors, right? That if the people stand up and they don't have any warriors, then it's over, right? And those warriors are not necessarily beneficiaries. They're just caught up in it. But yeah, it is correct, though, to say that, like, yeah, those police are part of that ownership class. They are, you know, the armed men. I think the people are artificially thinning the line between fascism and communism. They don't relate. Yeah, for sure, Barnabas. Like, I think most people, in most people's minds, when they do this, when they're like, fascism and communism are the same, what they're saying is, I know that fascists have done bad things, and communists have also done bad things. Therefore, they're the same. It's like as reductive as it can get. It's so reduced. Nail it. Okay, here we go. Now it's the people or class that own the machine that utilizes fascism to maintain its wealth, power through state-sanctioned violence. Yeah, I think, and again, I think it's good to reinforce that I do think that distinction matters, because in one case you're talking about a mechanism or a machine which allows you to talk about it without judgment, right? That like, you can talk about how the system of capital operates and how it works, and you're not condemning anybody. It's just how it is. I feel like Richard Wolff does this really well. right? I really respect the way that Richard Wolff goes about it. That sometimes he dips into a little bit more judgmental territory. Like sometimes he gets there, but he never really names names, right? He's not like, we should storm this guy's house or anything like that. Like, he's always very kind of focused in on the machine, on the structure of how it operates. Whereas fascism, like those people are dicks. Like we can say it pretty plainly, right? Like, we are no longer, like, we're dealing with the people who know that should we alter the system, the machine, they will no longer have their position of power, and so they're choosing to use violence and force in order to maintain their position of privilege. Like, they can get fucked completely. And I think that is an important distinction to make. Because, like, here's a good example. And unless somebody presents something to me that convinces me otherwise, and I definitely can be convinced. Someone like Peter Schiff, for example, right? Like, Peter Schiff is like a pretty straightforward capitalist, right? Like, but I always like listening to him because he's always quite honest about it. Because his perspective is very much like, we should tell the truth about how this works because that's how you're going to make money. And if you delude yourself about how things happen, then you're going to lose a lot of money, right? So it's whenever I listen to Peter Schiff, I'm listening. It feels like I'm listening to somebody who's talking about like how to play poker really well. Like, he intrinsically understands that everything you do is a gamble within the system of capital, but that there are good gambles and bad gambles. And if you want to make a good gamble, then you better be telling the truth about how it works. And of course, I don't agree with everything he thinks. Like, I think, and sometimes I think he gets himself into a lot of moral trouble, but I don't think that he particularly cares so much about that. But I would look at someone like Peter Schiff and think to myself, well, okay, like, we can have a conversation about the structure of the piece and talk about how we can change things structurally. And as long as Peter Schiff didn't, like, pull out a dagger and start coming at me, right? Or start funding thug groups or anything like this to prevent me from doing it. Like, if a man like him and me had a conversation about how to alter the system, like, if we were the only two people, and I talked to him and he was like, oh yeah, okay, like, I see how the machine can be changed, and we could reform it, right? That'd be like a classic liberal position, right? Like, just, a reformist position. We can turn this bolt, right? We can move this panel over here. We can rearrange these cogs in this way so that this is a better kind of a thing. That would be kind of how Peter Schiff, I think, would look at things. And we could have a more reasonable conversation. But he would never agree to that if I was coming at him and being like, you're a fucking capitalist pig, dick, ass shit fucking. And he'd be like, hey, get fucked. Like, get out of here. So that it would be more, that for a man like him, it would be more useful to just have the structural conversation, right? And for liberals generally, I think it'd be more useful to have the structural conversation. Whereas when you're talking about fascism, now you're talking about the real, like, now you can go hard. You can go hard in the paint with the moral indictment, right? Yeah. George Hegel is the father of philosophical idealism. Marx, as a dialectical materialist, is the inverse of Hegel. Was. Neo-Hegelianism, assemblage theory is where it's at. Shakespeare. You got it, dude. Hey, DM. Hi, John. Just want to jump in and remind everyone to be at the big protest in Toronto, Monday, August 1st, 4 p.m. in front of the University Varsity Blues Track Stadium. Dundas. Not Dundas. Bloor. Not Dundas. Nope. Bloor. Bloor and Bedford. Bloor and Bedford. Bloor and Bedford. Not Dundas. Bloor. Bloor and Bedford. Bloor and Bedford. August 1st, 4 p.m. Shakespeare. And thank you, though, DM. Thanks for coming in and saying that. I'm having a kind of a lackadaisical one today, so it's good. It's good that we've got some. It's good that we've got some goddamn professionals in the chat today. God damn it! Finally, somebody who's getting down to the brass tacks, the nuts and bolts, reminding everybody what this is all actually about. Get into the streets and protest. God damn it! Thank you, DM. You're doing God's work. Shakespeare was a social commentarian, and so good at his commentary is still viable 500 years later. Yeah, because he was talking about humans, like and he was really good at piercing through to the humanity, and Content, you got to be careful, Content. That was a nice conversation, though. I feel like I went through something really nice just there, so thank you, even though that's not what you meant. You did that to me once before. You gotta be careful, Cotton, man. You gotta be careful. Like, it's just what happens, man. It's just what happens. I'm a Neo Rule 34ian Markson. Ooh, very good, Barnabas. Very good. God Almighty, John has his KFAB stat maxed out. I don't know what this is. What is this? KFAB. What is this? The fact or convention of presenting stage performances as genuine or authentic. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm a trained actor. Like, I am. I'm a trained actor. Like, I have a degree in theater. It's hanging right there, from the University of Manitoba. I went to acting school. I was trained as an actor. And in many ways, I actually think that training helped break me out of fundamentalist Christianity and helped send me down a different sort of spiritual path in many ways. And so I can never be upset about it, even though economically speaking, it's never panned out for me. But like that, to me, that's the obtuseness of our system. Like, don't we want to send people to schools in order to have them break from their delusions? Like, don't we want people walking around the society looking at reality as reality, first and foremost? That's exactly what happened for me. Like, that's exactly what happened for me. But people like me are completely disincentivized to do so because it threw me into poverty. Like, I will never financially recover from this. That kind of thing. So everyone is disincentivized from doing it. Not to mention the public humiliation. Right? The constant humiliation that comes from conservatives and liberals for people who choose that path. So instead of creating a society where we say, yeah, we should allow people to go to institutions to investigate themselves and shed their delusions for the betterment of society as a whole, we say, get a job. Yeah, that didn't get you a job, did it, idiot? Oh, you didn't get a fucking job? Yeah, well, then go die in the streets, you fucking idiot. Jesus, yeah, no wonder you're suffering and crying like a little baby. You went and what? Got a degree in theater? An actor? No wonder, you stupid moron. You should have gone and gotten a plumbing. You should have just become a plumber like me. You know who I love, though? That Trump guy. That's exactly what happened. So there's a reason, yes, I definitely have my KFAB strategy stat maxed out. Isaac Newton overrated, couldn't even explain gravity. Pfft, idiot. Yeah, you got it, dude. You nailed it. Oh yeah, Watson's great. I'm so happy that somebody like Watson's in the chat. The reason why I really like having Watson in the chat is because I can tell he knows more than I do about the subject. I for sure can tell that he knows more about Trotsky without a doubt, and so it keeps me honest. That's what I like the most about it. I feel that way about Mocked too. Mocked will come at me from time to time with like a fact or something like that, where it's like, oh, like and it's so important that someone like me is kept honest, and it's so important that someone like me is challenged to because if we don't have if we're not planted in reality, then we've got nothing, right? Like if we're not at least attempting to tell the truth, then we've got nothing. And the last thing I want to do is be saying something that's false. I would rather be wrong than say something that's false. And so I really appreciate people keeping me honest. And Watson does it with such a delicate hand too. It's so nice. You don't even feel the dagger going into your heart. I'm fucking around. Lauryn Hill's Mystery of Inequity does it best. Lauryn Hill? Really? Wow. There's something about theological, especially Christian imagery, that makes it so cool and enrapturing, so visceral. I mean, the death and resurrection of Christ is like, it is by its very definition visceral. Like crucifixion is crazy, dude. It is crazy to think about crucifixion. Like absolutely. Like one of the ways that you can actually tell that modern Christians have like zero empathy whatsoever is their complete lack of understanding of like what crucifixion actually is. Like from a straight up just like physical aspect, it's horrifying what happens. But then the idea that you're taking a person who is crucified and then presenting them in public, right? Like you live in hell. Like, if you are living in a society where when you're walking down the street, you can see a crucified person, and it's accepted that the most powerful people in the society want it that way, you live in hell. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Like, what? What the fuck is that? Like, one of my big turning points, because I feel like everybody who bounces off of fundamentalism has a moment where they take the Bible and they throw it away, and they take Christianity and just go, this is worthless. And one of the things that kind of brought me back to being like, no, Christianity is not worthless, is that Christianity is the stated reason why crucifixion was banned, right? And you can sort of debate the level of how true is that, if you'd like, but Constantine banned the practice of crucifixion throughout the Roman Empire. Stated reason was the story of Christ. Sounds like a resounding success and we've never done it, and we've never gone back yet. We haven't got to the point where we're crucifying people in public again, right? And it wasn't like once in a while. Like that's the thing I think people don't really understand about like the horror show that was the Roman Empire. It wasn't like it was happening once in a while. And that there are lots of stories about thousands of people being crucified. And crucifixion, the Roman military, their stated policy on going into villages in order to ask questions of the local people to gather information would be to grab a random person, crucify them, then start asking questions. That was their policy. That's how they rolled. The HBO show Rome really captured it really well. And the most horrifying aspect of the concept of crucifixion, in my view, is the idea that the citizenry would become banal about it. Like, you imagine that there would be sections of the populace in which this just becomes normalized. And if something like crucifixion can become normalized within the human ethos and the human idea, then anything can become normalized. We can accept any kind of horror show that's directly in front of us, as long as everybody is just like, well, it is what it is. Right? And then you think about the true horror show of the Roman Empire was that, like, the whole thing was based on slavery. It was take poor Romans, shove them into this military apparatus, send them northward and throughout and all this to gather up people, to send them back to the imperial core, And should those slaves revolt, murder and crucify them publicly. Spartacus, the story of Spartacus, is one of these slave revolts. The third servile war was Spartacus, right? So it happened twice before where the slaves got together and revolted, right? So Spartacus, everybody knows Spartacus. And he had the slave revolt. And when he lost to the Roman military, 10,000 men were crucified along the Agrippa Way. To give you a sense of what that looks like, right? So here's Rome, right? Here, and I believe it's here, is the port. So from here to here, right? So if you're a slave captured up in here, right? And you're getting transported into Rome, then on the journey from here to here, you see 10,000 crosses where there are 10,000 people hanging. And that's your introduction to Rome. Imagine living in such a society. So you know, as a slave, like you know, there's no military revolt. That's not happening. We tried it 3 times. We saw what the result was. I'm more or less convinced that we'll see a similar thing in our society. Something like that will happen again, where there will be some kind of public act of extraordinary violence that is inflicted on the populace in order to terrorize the public into maintaining public order. And that's exactly how it'll be described. That'll be an act of maintaining public order. And how do I know? Because that's how the Romans called it. And to me, this is why the story of Christ is crucially important. Crucially important. And why it's a goddamn shame the lunatics have taken control of it. And the people who know who claim to have authority over it are deluded magicians, basically. People who think magic is real, who think it's more important that Christ actually walked on water than to talk about the cultural significance and the events surrounding it, right? And like, for God's sakes, like, when the Christians start walking around in Rome and doing all this kind of stuff, they get crucified just for spreading the story around. Like, that's how crazy this place was. Imagine you made a story up. Like, this is why I don't respect people who are like, well, Christ didn't really exist, you know. Who cares? I don't give a shit at all. If you wrote a book about a fictional character and the state murdered you for it, right? Yeah. And then a group of people did everything they could to keep the story alive and spread it throughout the place, right? And then that became the dominant culture. I'd be like, yeah, might be worth some investigation into what the fuck was that about. And to me, it does come down to a very simple statement of love will win. The Christ narrative is a man walking around saying, love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God, which semantically we should understand as love the environment, love the world, love the universe. And the state crucified him for it. But he won anyway. I think that's very powerful. I think it's extremely powerful. That a state as oppressive and repressive and evil and psychotic as the Roman Empire, publicly executing people, 10,000 people, engaging in a form of slavery that makes American slavery look like baby's first slavery. Like, these guys were not fucking around, and they weren't pretending. There was no veneer at all. There was no sense that we even had to justify this. And And if that can be defeated by a fictional story about a man walking around saying give a shit about one another, then we have hope. That it's going to get dark. That it's going to get dark. And it's going to get bleak. And it's going to get scary. And then it won't. And we won't be around to see it, as those Christians weren't around to see it. Crucifixion wasn't banned until 300 years later. But we know that it will happen. And how do we know? Because it's already happened before. Because when we do a material analysis and a historical analysis of such things, we know how the story goes. We've seen it before. That the state will do everything it can to destroy and maintain its power and dominate and control. It will bomb people, it will murder people, it will publicly torture people. It will spread horror and malice throughout the world, and then it will lose. So read your Bible. Especially as these frauds take over. Anyway. Fascism steals the idea a nation of one class, but instead of being free worker state, they want people to be slaves for the state and take worker rights away. Well, and let's be really honest, like, especially Western fascism is like, white males are what matter. It's the patriarchy, right? It's what feminists talk about when they talk about the patriarchy, right? Like when the fascists show up, it's white men, and they're asserting their white maleness, right? So, and everybody else works for them. Okay, regarding the identity issues, Jews, blacks, homosexuals being scapegoated simply divert people from the class issues, demoralization embedded in fact. Oh yes, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The state ensures its existence by not ensuring its people's rights. That's where the power comes from, being irresponsible. They can just turn it on when they like, and that's why they're powerful, yeah? And they are always linked to capital. The capitalist system turns to this very easily, yeah? It's waving keys with one hand and grabbing a gun with another, yeah? In fascism, the ruling class uses demoralized elements of the petty bourgeoisie and the lumpen proletariat as a battering ram against the proletarian revolution, for sure. For sure. Yeah, and we can see that pretty clearly throughout the states right now, right? Especially the southern states. That it's actually people like Clinton who planted those seeds by dismantling the welfare state and by abandoning huge sections of the South, right? And these demoralized elements, absolutely. And I mean, for God's sakes, like, think about how every movie you've ever seen about the South, is there a movie where Southerners are presented as like a good people or smart or nice somehow, right? Most of the movies I see and most of the media I've seen, like, Southerners are presented as hicks, right? As real, like, degenerate types. And I can see how that would engender a type of deep resentment and rage in those communities, right? And like constantly being battered around. And sometimes for good reason. Like, I mean, the history of slavery is real. And constantly making movies about the history of like Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi, right? And constantly presenting the slavers there in a negative light. I mean, I don't know what else you could do, right? But I can see how it would have a very demoralizing effect, and how that energy could be rallied in a by a fascist culture as this battering ram against proletarian revolution. Yeah, absolutely. And most of the members of these patriot groups are made up of small business owners, petty bourgeoisie, and unemployed and poorly educated members of the working class. Yeah. And those patriot groups are well financed by finance capital. Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys keep calling for the numbers. Should we do it? We've literally got like 10 minutes left on the clock. Let's just here, let me run through this quick. Saying for a while, the greatest gift that Ayn Rand was to directly tell what capitalism is about, how immoral it is, and that we should celebrate it. Yeah. Oh no, and thank you, DM. Thank you for reminding us about it, and thank you for spreading the word. Absolutely. Tell everybody. Tell the world. Yeah. Crucifixion is possibly the worst way to die, other than to be eaten by wolverines high on PCP. Dude, that's extraordinarily specific. That's extraordinarily specific. Yeah. Good to see you mocked. When the Pharaoh oppressed the Jews, God sent Moses. When the Romans oppressed the Jews, God sent Jesus. When the Nazis oppressed the Jews, God sent Stalin. Fantastic. Parenti does an excellent indictment of the Roman... Yes, and Parenti's commentary on Julius Caesar is very interesting. His theory that the reason why Caesar is executed is because he gave concessions to the slave class is well argued and very interesting. Parenti is a very interesting figure. Like, it's a shame that he was taken from us too soon. We could have gotten another 15 years of Parenti, but that's not how it works. No, you're sober and alive, and the Wolverines are starving and high on PPs. You want to be crucified now? I'm moving on from this. Okay, we got the number. We're doing the number. Jesus. That's why I don't like talking about crucifixion, because it inevitably devolves in this kind of gore porn place. All right, here we go. I'm with you on a 7, Mocked. You and me. Ride or die. Ride or die. We got a 7, we got a 6, we got an 8, we got a 5, we got a 3. Yeah. I feel like there's not that many of you in the chat anymore, because I was very selfish today. Today was very selfish. I'll admit it. No, I know Parenti is technically alive, but... Okay, here we go. It's the big 7. It's just, I feel it. It's the 7, for sure. 5. Oh, you know what, Watson? There you go. That's a little gift for you. From David Lynch to you. For your excellent work in the chat today. For your contribution. And right, same story with you, DM. Your excellent work in the chat today. Well done. The energy of David Lynch looked out into the world and said, today we're going to help the helpers. Today the energy is gonna land on the helpers. And who's been helping? Well, today it's UDM and Watson for sure. For sure. A good chat today. Very convincing, Watson. I feel like we all learned something today. For those of us who tuned in. Who stuck around, I should say. Yeah. 3 is always half of 8. That's exactly right, dude. I'm so glad that stuck. Right? There's no reason for that to stick. But it did. Okay, I have 15 minutes on the clock. Here comes the lightning round. The lightning round. We already did the Bank of Canada hike. Inflation rises. Yeah, we all know, right? Inflation's going crazy. Hey, about 35% of millennials have nothing saved for retirement, and 20% say that they will never retire. Isn't revolution inevitable? Ha ha! People are not going to tolerate this, dude. Like, I'm what's called an elder millennial, right? I'm like right on the cusp. But if I wanted to say that I was part of Gen X, I could get away with it. But I say I'm of the millennial generation because I think I sympathize more with the millennials than I do with Gen X type people. And I'm telling you right now, guys, as the millennials turn 40, 45, 50, They're not going to tolerate this. Like, they're just not. And then as Gen Z moves along, and it's going to be worse for them, they're just not going to tolerate it. It's just not going to be. If I wasn't in the position I was in right now, with the job I've got right now, like if I was at all, like struggling away at this, like there's a seething rage. There's a seething rage. And the fascists are grabbing onto it. You can see it. It's rising in the United States. But as this goes along, even people who have good jobs, they're just like, what the fuck? What is this? Oh yeah, for sure, dude. For sure. Nearly half of Toronto's young adults are living with their parents. Right? Like, and this is only going to get worse too. When they say young adults, what do they say? Data shows 47% of young adults in the city are living in the same household as at least one parent. Young adults are between the ages of 20 and 34. Like, this, it's not working. Like, and you got to be kidding yourself. Like, if you're literally walking around saying like, yeah, capitalism's great, shut the fuck up. Like, no, it is not. Fed's confident dental care program will land on time. Yeah. I wish that there was a place I could go to take a bet on this, because I'm basically convinced that this is not going to happen. And how do I know it's not going to happen? So first of all, provinces still haven't received $2 billion in health top-ups announced by Liberals in March. So since when have the Liberals ever delivered on anything? But also, Conservatives opposed the dental program, with Candice Bergen declaring it to be wasteful spending. Well, who's going to form the next government? So what's the strategy here, do you think? Hey guys, we're definitely doing the dental program. For sure, we're doing the dental program. It's absolutely happening. Oopsies, the Conservatives cancelled it. Oopsie-doos. Look, the Conservatives did the thing that they always did every single time, because they are our allies and we work with them to do these things. Right? It's a grift. It's a bamboozling right before the next election. You got it, bud. You got it, right? But no, it's gonna come in and they're gonna be like, right, like literally the day before the election, they're gonna be like, boop, and then they're gonna lose the election, right, to the Conservatives, who will cancel it immediately, as planned. Like if they wanted this to be passed, they would pass it. Very straightforwardly. And the idea that the Conservatives are not just going to get rid of it, as planned, like, get completely fucked. Like, they all work for the same team, man. Okay. WMD in Ukraine. A planetary near-death experience. Yeah. People are really starting to get concerned about the whole nuclear bomb part about this whole thing. North Korea recognizes the independence of Donetsk People's Republic. So there's that, if you're a North Korea fan. A Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, a Putin ally, says the world is moving closer to a big war where there will be no winner. That's scary. That's scary as shit. One sort of hopes that this whole thing kind of diffuses out. Probably won't. Probably won't. Yeah. WMDs. And then we got Ottawa must be honest with Canadians about troops in Ukraine. That's cute. Canadian Dimension, man. Like, I get why people write articles like this, right? But I really wish we would start writing articles that were more like, why won't Ottawa be honest about Canadians about troops in Ukraine? Right? So instead of writing an article that's like, this is definitely what should happen, I wish the articles were more like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Why not? You know? That's what I would prefer. That I find these to be kind of wanky in a way. A way for a person to kind of grandstand and feel good about themselves when they know full well that that's not going to happen. They know full well that's not going to happen. And so the better thing to do is to ask, why not? Why not? Yep, of course the system is of capitalism is great. It's designed for the rich and not for the poor. After all, what we need is to make the rich richer. Who cares about the poor and the needy? Yeah. Kind of like wins 3 paid sick days, yeah, or the basic income pilot program, the raising the minimum wage to $15 here in Ontario, right? Like, that was something that she was like, yeah, we're gonna do it after the election. Oops, we lost. Conservatives got rid of it. Oopsie-doo, as planned. John, you can easily secure funding for your revolutionary activities. Just start a GoFundMe saying that you need to help buy an M134 for self-defense and sticking it to President Brandon. Yeah, dude. You got it. Just do fraud. You got to watch that ridiculous video about the nuclear attack on New York City. Is it this one? No, there was another thing. I know what you're talking about. Oh, I wanted to show this very briefly because this does a really good job of showing you the map of how it is. Like this, green is Russian-controlled territory. Yellow, not Russian-controlled territory, right? I can't show the video, but because of stupid audio reasons. But the basic thing that this video is talking about is that there's skirmishes going along this border here. There was bombing on Lugansk, and then I think the really big piece of news that comes out of this is that Russia and Ukraine are reaching an agreement about grain exports from Ukraine. Like all along, Russia has been saying, we don't want there to be a famine. Big reason why they're not in this area. Big reason why they're not in this area is because they're like, we don't want to make a famine. Like we want you guys to grow the grain. We want to avoid that. And it looks like the negotiations that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, like Russia is not going to stand in the way. They're going to let grain exports leave Ukraine. So there's still some sanity in the world. Yeah, anyone dumb enough to fall for that deserves to lose their money. Dude, you know the Nigerian prince scam, right? I'm a Nigerian prince and I need a blah, 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 right? That works. That works so much that Nigeria reports it. It's a significant part of Nigerian GDP, right? It still works. What the fuck, dude? Like that's an old scam. Like that's like when you talk about scams, one of the first things you reach for is like the snake oil salesman, right? Like that image. But the Nigerian prince scam is right there. Like for sure. You're like, yeah, he's like scamming him like the Nigerian prince thing, right? Yeah, every scam works when you scale it up with enough people. Statistics, man, powerful stuff. I admire the bravado more than anything. That's what I think I admire about it more than anything. I'm just like, that is a nation of ballers. Absolutely. Where they're just like, yeah, I'm a Nigerian prince, give me money. And people are just like, no, there's a Nigerian prince, I should just give money. It's just like fishing. But you just have to have like these ginormous balls to be able to just be like, yeah, just give me fucking Nigerian prince, give me money. I am a Nigerian prince, give me money. Crazy, bro. Just crazy. Yeah, we're heading to war because the West, especially its ruling class, are not content with being anything less than number one, and are willing to take everything out if they can't have their way. Yeah, turns out that manifest destiny is a failed ideology, right? Turns out that the whole, like, we here in America are the best, and if anybody says we're not the best, we'll bomb them. That's their whole shtick. And so, guess what? And like, who defines what's the best? Like, that's the thing that kills me the most about it, is like, who's actually defining what is or is not the best? Like, and if your ideology was be the best, wouldn't the best thing to do be to improve your own country, right? That the United States strategy of be the best is literally be the best by ensuring everyone else is decimated. That's how the United States defines being the best. right? But then along comes a place like China. It's just like, well, being the best means improving your own country and improving things and creating infrastructure and doing this kind of stuff and building the society up over time, so that as generations go by, the generation that came up, it has a better go of it as the one, and then it improves and it improves and improves through infrastructure projects, through base materialism, through improving the quality of the standard of living for people, through these sorts of methods. And the US is just like, nope, bomb them. That's how we stay on top. Yeah, my grandma was nearly scammed today. Thankfully, my mom was there. Brutal. Best Nigerian prince email I ever saw was him being stuck in space. Amazing, Adam. That's amazing, dude. Him being stuck in space, that adds like a whole other level of it. And yet maintains the believability of the scam somehow. Like, sure, a Nigerian prince stuck in space. Sending out a help. I just love the idea of somebody being like, oh my God! Like, oh my God, there's a Nigerian prince trapped in space. Oh, we gotta help. Bethany, we gotta send some money. Can you do a trap? I don't remember how to use the phone properly. But Bethany, come here. We gotta help this Nigerian prince. He's trapped in space. He can't get down unless he gets $400. If he can get $400 as a loan. Oh, and then he says after he gets the money, he can turn around and reward us once he gets back. He doesn't have his internet connection because he's into space right now. He doesn't have his internet connection. Although, how's he send the thing in the first place? He doesn't have his internet connection. And once he gets back, he's going to give us $4,000. What's it? That's like twice as much at least. That's at least twice as much. Oh, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Like, I love it. Like, I love it. When I lived in New York City, this guy tried to use that exact scam on me in person. Just the balls. Just the balls, right? You just gotta look at this guy and just be like, nah, bro. Like, I don't even think I could be mad. Nah, bro. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Well, I wasn't trying to be like the Southern accent. I was trying to do, what's his name? Oh, come on. You guys know the guy that I'm talking about. Not Dale. Doug from King of the Hill. This guy. No, not this guy. Shut up. Come on, King of the Hill. There's an actor. King of the Hill, not Mike Judge. Stephen Root. This guy. You guys know this guy. This guy does great voices, right? This is the guy that I was trying to do. Because he plays the best dumb guy. Like, his dumb guy is so... there's this great Frank Zappa quote that goes, stupidity is kind of charming. Ignorance is not. And I always think of this guy when I think of that quote, because like he captures that kind of charming stupidity. Like you're not mad at this guy. You know, you sympathize with him because you're like, yeah, bud, I feel you. If somebody asked me to do a dumb guy voice, like if I was to do my own thing with it, without doing this character of this guy, I'd use this voice. Oh, hey, I just got an email from a Nigerian prince. Ha ha! Can you believe it? I didn't even know they had computers. Oh, It looks here like this Nigerian prince wants me to send him $450. But you're right. Like, it becomes Southern immediately. No, you're absolutely right. Even with this voice, he becomes a Southerner. Well, I think that I gotta make me some. I don't know about this idea right here. Maybe if I send him $200. He was the guy who shot. Yeah, he's done a lot of things. Stephen Root's done a ton of stuff. He was one of the characters in King of the Hill, which is why I was looking up King of the Hill. But like, he's done a ton of stuff. Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe, which I didn't even know that was a thing. He was in Barry, Young Justice. There's definitely one thing that you're 100% going to be like, oh yeah, that guy. The Tragedy of Macbeth. And I think the thing I like about him is that he's actually, like, he's got a lot of, he's got a good range. I think that's the big thing. If you guys, here, I gotta go back a little bit further. If you guys remember Office Space, remember the guy who's like, it's my stapler. My stapler. That's him. And he was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, yeah, he was Boyle's father. DreamWorks Dragons. See what I'm talking about? Like, the guy just keeps working. Like, they just give him, he was in The Newsroom, Superman Unbound. Matt Damon goes on strike. I love looking through the IMDb of, like, actors like this who just are, like, working actors. They just get lots of roles. Because you find things like that where it's like Matt Damon goes to space and you're like, yeah, Gravity Falls, Bud Gleeful. What was that? What was that called? Matt Damon something? I missed it. Matt Damon goes on strike. That's hilarious. Anyway. You guys can look this guy up. He's done a ton of stuff. Ton of voice work. Like, in Batman the Brave and the Bold, he was Penguin, Woozy Winks, Killer Croc, right? Like, he's but King of the Hill, Bill. King of the Hill. Like, you guys know King of the Hill. He was Bill. You guys know. Alright, guys. We've reached the end of today. We did it. That was a fun one today, guys. That was a fun one. Really nice. Really nice. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Special thanks to you today, Watson. You too, DM. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaire class is doing everything it can to make sure you never realize it. So you just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.